he's sitting there and he's talking. He's like, you know, I want to tell you guys, 32 of you in the class today. One of you is a real man. So, we're sitting there, you know. How we doing?
Oh, it started.
We got 2 minutes.
Jeremy coming in?
No. That's the chair today.
Good morning.
No. Yeah.
This is why you didn't come in today.
Yes, sir.
You didn't want to read It's just,
Holy crap.
that's it. For probation service. Probation service.
This is their increase for, or proposed increases for headcounts.
Oh, well. We have a look at
No, but I had no idea that, like, oh, those are group, oh, these are all groups, okay. Because I was saying $90 a night.
Maybe you did one summer. You did. Yeah, there's, you have to make sure it's like, we know. You can see them before you can.
Why is it 11?
Oh.
That's 11.
What you see. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's
Did you get that copy of this?
Which means, yeah, we have to watch that one.
Live, Mike?
I think we are. Oh, great. It's 9 a.m. We will call to order the July 20th, 2021 meeting of the Trinity County Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Groves, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I would love to, Supervisor. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will go into public comment section. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of the board. When addressing the board, please state your name and for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter for a subsequent board agenda. Is there anyone wishing to comment?
Mr. Vice Chair, real quick, we're pulling 3.1. So, you want to announce that?
Okay,
Or do you want me to announce it?
I can announce that. Item 3.1 and planning and zoning will be pulled from today's agenda because it wasn't noticed properly in the newspaper, and it will be heard July 30th at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on that. Margaret, will we allow public testimony of that item today?
The item has been pulled, so no.
Okay, thank
You
you.
have to do the item otherwise.
I have one question about that. There was concern over if we postpone it that far, that the date would exceed 45 days. Is that a problem?
It does not. We had confirmed that with planning that that would be the last day. So we are doing it on the last day, so it cannot be continued past that.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes, we have Adrian Keys.
Hey, good morning, board. Adrian Keys from Hayfork. First, I want to thank you all for allowing us to continue to use the Zoom function to attend these meetings. I think it's great for the democratic process, and it's great as far as, extra miles, extra cars on the road all the time. I mean, last 5 or 6 years, I've been coming up to Weaverville a lot, and this is really nice to be able to do it from home, although I do hope to be back in there one of these days and comment in person. The first thing I'd like to ask is future agenda items is the cannabis transition plan and the UO extension. We clearly are getting close to the deadline on that, and we really would like to see some action on that. I'd like to have seen that on this agenda, but maybe next time. I'd also really like to ask for an update from the Sheriff's Department on enforcement, specifically to the grant funds that have been received and to the satellite program and to the funds that were generated essentially through the cannabis industry to fund that as a participant program. I'd like to know what's going on with those funds. And also, I'd like to just ask as a favor, or maybe as just a functionality point, that as we continue these conversations around cannabis, that we don't continue to lump in the unregulated with the regulated market. It makes the conversations really muddy and very difficult to interpret. And I don't believe it's helped us to a better place throughout all of these conversations. I feel that the regulated side is, we're just waiting for a CEQA opportunity. Many of us have completed most, if not all, of the requirements and just have no opportunity as of yet to even show that. And in the meantime, the illicit market is operating at top speed and it doesn't seem to be being quelled at all. And so I would hope that people who have concerns about cultivation in their neighborhood are also talking to law enforcement and not just to planning about those activities. I understand some of these neighborhoods have like one cultivation site with a permit in them, but are suffering underneath the weight of illicit cultivation. And that is, if they're not in the program, then they're not really under the jurisdiction of planning. And so I would just like to try and get those items as straight as possible, so as we move forward, we can be as productive and as efficient as possible. And that's it for me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other public comment?
Tom Stokely.
Hi, members of the board. I'm Tom Stokely from Mount Shasta, California. I'm not here to talk about the Trinity River Restoration Program. But I am here to tell you that there are other things going on in the water world that affect the Trinity River, Trinity Lake, and Trinity County. Since I retired from your planning department in late 2008, I've been involved with a number of nonprofits and have continued efforts to try to protect the Trinity River. Since 3 out of 5 of your board members are new, I thought I'd make an offer to you that if you're interested, sometime I'd be happy to come and talk to you about some of these issues, such as the Delta Conveyance Project, the Delta Tunnel, such as Sykes Reservoir. I've been working on that and trying to come up with water right terms and conditions that would protect the Trinity River. And probably even more importantly, the Sacramento River Temperature Management Plan, which is an annual exercise where the Bureau of Reclamation meters out water from Shasta and Trinity and Folsom and the other reservoirs in the Central Valley project and meets its water and power commitments. You may or may not be aware that this year is absolutely dire. We're looking at probably 100% mortality of the winter run Chinook on the Sacramento River, perhaps close to 100% mortality of the commercially valuable fall run Chinook, and the Trinity River plays a role in that because Trinity River diversions to the Sacramento River actually heat up the Sacramento River. I worked with a couple of other nonprofits this year to come up with an alternative temperature management plan that would have saved more fish in the Sacramento. It would have made cooler temperatures for fish in the Trinity River, and it would have actually left another 500,000 acre-feet of storage in both Trinity and Shasta, probably 200,000 to 300,000 acre-feet. As it is, that plan was not adopted by the State Water Board, and if we do have another dry winter, it will be something like we've never seen in our lifetime. There simply will not be enough water for the river, for cities, for farms, or for people in general. So anyway, I'll make that offer. If you're interested, I'd be happy to come back and talk to you. If not, then I wish you well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else on that?
How does one get into public comment?
You can start.
I can start, okay. My name's Everett Harvey. I'm the guy who says that there's pedestrian peril persisting. The intersection of Highway 3 and 299 in downtown Weaverville. A good friend of mine got clobbered by a car there in a very easy situation, making a left turn. The pedestrian was in the crosswalk. Something needs to be done about that. That's the main thing I'm talking about. I'm done.
Thank you.
Great.
I have no other public comments on Zoom.
And I don't see any in the room. With that, we'll close public comment and move on to presentations.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Chair. Request to the board that we direct Mr. Coons to talk to Rick Tippett about the crosswalk. I know it's a Caltrans issue, but if we could have him at least talk and give us a little update on what, if they feel it's a safe crosswalk. We have downtown Weirville is difficult to get across sometimes, and so I'd just like to see if there's a different alternative or if that's a crosswalk that should be removed. That's all right.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that they let all the delivery trucks of all sides park in the middle of the road there. And that makes it difficult. I mean, full semi, UPS, and everything in between. I know it's easy for delivery. I know that's easy for delivery, but it's hard on pedestrians. So we could address that in some fashion. That would be great also.
Thank you.
And before we proceed, I just have a concern. There were a couple of people that came into the boardroom after you announced the item that was pulled, and they may have still been traveling. I just would hate to see someone waiting if they were not aware.
Okay, I can just for people in the audience, we'll be pulling item 3.1 because it was improperly noticed. So if you're here for that, we won't be hearing it today. All right.
I'd also like to comment, please.
Public comment period is closed.
That's fine, thank you.
All right. Item 1.1, adopt a proclamation recognizing July 18th through 24th, 2021 as Probation Services Week. No fiscal impact.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Sorry, a little short. I'm Ruby Fierro, Chief Probation Officer, and I want to thank you for taking time this morning to recognize Probation Services Week. I came into this department about 6 weeks ago, and I have found that Chief Tim Rogers ran a very good department. The staff there, the officers, the support staff, they're a team of talented people who are very dedicated to this community. Probation has the ability to work with people in a way that there's a balance of accountability for their actions and to make victims whole, and also balancing that with the opportunity for them to become better versions of themselves and get treatments that they may need. And so that balance of accountability and opportunity that probation is able to provide to people helps this community. And so with that, I'd just like to thank you, and I'm honored to receive this proclamation from the board on behalf of the department today.
What's that?
All right. A proclamation of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Trinity recognizing July 18th through 24th, 2021 as Probation Services Week. Whereas probation is an alternative to incarceration, and California's probation mission is to deliver a seamless approach to providing effective supervision and rehabilitation services to justice-involved individuals, and whereas probation professionals play a unique and essential role in our justice system and our communities, and are focused on helping justice-involved individuals transition out of the system permanently through transformative and evidence-based rehabilitation. Probation officers are trained experts prepared to manage trauma and other needs of system-involved individuals and safely connect them to the support they need. And whereas probation connects service and need to enhance community safety and restoration of justice-involved individuals.
Recording in progress.
Probation departments are a connector in the justice system, interlacing and maximizing the resources available within the courts, local governments, law enforcement, social services, behavioral health, schools, crime, survivor organizations, nonprofits, and the community to reduce recidivism by carefully balancing direct human services and research-based deterrence and interventions. And whereas probation departments in California are focused on supporting and advocating for policies that will further the focus to help justice-involved individuals transition back to our community safely and apply an equity lens to ensure these policies will effectively address the diverse needs of those probation departments serve, and whereas probation efforts to balance the need for accountability with the need for rehabilitative treatments and service opportunities provides justice-involved individuals the support and opportunities needed to move on to healthier and safer life pathways. And whereas by delivering sustainable community safety, probation departments have a profound impact on the safety and the health of our communities by working to reduce recidivism through the evidence-based program and supervision. Probation success ensures that our community is a safer environment for everyone to live and prosper. And whereas this week the community is encouraged to recognize probation's immense contributions to our communities and state, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Trinity County, the County of Trinity, designate July 18th through 24th, 2021 as Probation Services Week.
Thank you.
Present it to Whitney.
And I think we need to vote on that too.
Come on, smile, man.
We don't need a vote.
We don't need a vote?
No, we do not need a vote. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Those right papers are hanging up.
Moving on to consent calendar. These items include routine, non-controversial matters and will be acted on by the board by one roll call motion, If a member of the public has any questions or comments on an item on the consent calendar, they may provide them now. A member of the board or staff may request an item be pulled and considered separately. Do you have any comment on the consent calendar?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Is there any items which the board would like to have pulled and considered separately? Hearing none, and I will do the board.
Can we have a motion?
I will move to adopt the consent calendar as submitted.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second now, and I can pull the board.
I would love to. Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, since our 10 a.m. public hearing has been pulled, we can go ahead and move on to reports and announcements, can we, without a time issue? All right. Item 4.1, reports and announcements. Are there any department heads that would like to report?
Tim Saxon, Sheriff's Office.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Just a couple of issues. Our jail construction project continues to move forward. As reported at the last meeting, we've received our certificate of occupancy for the construction portion, and we're moving forward on the inside operations. The electronics parts and our dispatch center are moving forward. We recently met with Office of Emergency Services persons who are installing our 911 next-gen system, so we're working on some details on that. And the rest of the electronics for the locks and surveillance systems are going in. A little bit behind schedule, but we're still moving forward. Now, we don't have a firm opening date, but we're hoping sometime around November, December. That's what we're shooting for right now. We have been providing mutual aid to Siskiyou County, Lassen County, and Plymouth County in response to their major fires that have been going on. So we've been helping out in response to Region 3 OAS mutual aid requests. And we just concluded a week-long major operation down in southern Trinity, where we had served over 20 search warrants on private properties in that area. The major goal of that was to disrupt some drug trafficking organizations in that particular area. Our efforts there led to approximately 66,400 marijuana plants eradicated. We confiscated almost 21,000 pounds of processed cannabis, received 12 firearms, dismantled 1 butane honey oil lab, and seized over $500,000 in cash. We did arrest 2 individuals and detained and interviewed 20 other individuals. So, and in response to the question by Adrian Keys, I am in the process of collecting some statistics and will be reporting out on our efforts with code enforcement, our narcotics team, with regard to our enforcement efforts on private parcels and our public lands. And I should have those available at the next meeting. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, Sheriff, this is Keith, and sorry, I should have emailed you this question earlier, but this is a total different subject, But a question was brought up to me about open carry in Trinity County, and state law says if you're going to open carry, you have to have a permit by the sheriff. What's your policy on that?
My policy is the same with the other 57 sheriffs in the state of California, and that is we do not believe in the open carry in the state of California, and that's my policy on that as well. Even though the penal code does give me the authority to do it, I'm not going to be issuing open carry in Trinity County.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't see any, thank you.
All righty, thank you.
Do we have any other department heads?
I don't see anyone moving, so I'm gonna go with no.
Okay. Report from County Administrative Officer.
Yeah, just real quickly, we met the last 2 weeks with all the departments to review budgets, revenues, and expenditures. We do, as normal, have a gap we have to fill because our proposed expenditures do outweigh our revenue. So we're working with our financial team and our consultant, and we'll bring that back together. I think we get back together next week, and he'll be making a bunch of suggestions, and we'll go through that and we'll be presented to the board in September. On a happier note, though, our cannabis building is about 95% complete. Still invite the board to come down and take a look at it. We're at the same place that the Sheriff's Detention Center is. We're in moving furniture time. Everything else is done, and we're going to start moving the furniture in and get computers hooked up. So if you'd like to take a look, it's a wonderful building. Staff did an incredible job. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, reports from supervisors. Supervisor Groves, you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I'll start off. So on the 14th, we had a town meeting in Trinity Center to discuss the wilderness proposal that's put together in the land swap between SPI and private groups that are then going to donate this land to the Forest Service, and some of those parcels in the very north end of the county do abut the wilderness area. I have been in discussions, and I want to thank the Forest Service for when we as a board approved the letter to support this. I had asked the Forest Service that Trinity County be involved in any discussion of wilderness, and they held to their word, and it was very productive. We, in my view, made some things that were better for the county that they went along with. But anyway, we had that meeting to open it up to the public and where the public asked questions. And on the 15th, I had a TMC call, which was a standard call. There was discussions of the winter flow white paper, which is the discussing raising water levels in the river. That's a process that is just starting, and is starting environmental and work and its comment periods. Then also, I was on the coast Thursday and Friday for the North Coast Resource. We were at Bear River Rancheria. I think they were Rancheria. They were very nice and hosted us. This is a group that we have supervisors from Sonoma, Mendocino, Humboldt, Del Norte, and Trinity are part of this group, and Siskiyou. Sorry to my Siskiyou friends. And we discuss water issues, and there's a lot of monies there. For example, they helped get monies for the Lewiston sewer project, and there's a lot of monies coming out from the state and for water issues. So we're highly involved in trying to get those monies spread out the whole North Coast. And then also, kind of on a side note at that meeting, the supervisor from the Trinity River District from Humboldt County had approached me and wanted to discuss the 50,000 acre feet that Humboldt and downriver users has, which was a very welcome outcome. We CAO and I have requested meetings from them on at least 4 occasions. Is that about right? Yeah, 4 occasions, and they have refused to talk to us about that. So this, they are now more interested in talking about that. So we'll be setting up some meetings with them to discuss our different viewpoints on how that water is going to be handled and who even owns it. So yeah, that's my, oh, well, I do have to, I should have warned Dan that on that way home I came up 36 and I went up to see the damage at Ruth, and you know, kind of wandered around your district a little bit, and it's a sight to see. Everybody should kind of wander through there and take a look. And this is after a lot of cleanup's been done. And I don't know the area very well, but I assume any place there was a cleanup and straw put out that there used to be a house there. I think that's kind of the gist of that. But the cleanup seems to be going well. I talked to the lady at the Ruth store. She said business was really good this year. So, but there's a lot of work to be done there, Dan. And so I feel sorry for the people in your district. And that's my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Cox.
Thank you. So first of all, to start off, I just would say that in the last meeting, I asked a question of staff that was not in the best form. I apologize for that, and I'm going to do my best to get that right in the future. Last week, we had a meeting with the folks from Superior California Economic Development and our County Grants Coordinator, Susie Calkins, and we are just starting those discussions and working to see if it would be a really good thing to reestablish that presence of economic development in Weaverville again, as it has been in some years past. So it's at the very beginning stages, but was a really productive and encouraging discussion. Yesterday, a meeting with PSA 2, and because we have exhausted all of our efforts to run that program excuse me, through a nonprofit as it's supposed to, and those have not been successful, it now opens up the door for us to be able to explore some other options. And so we're pursuing that and hoping that those funds can roll back into Weaverville and supply more meals than we are able to at this time. And so the sheriff did talk about the OES truck. I'm just really proud of that for Weaverville Fire to have that and be part of that strike team. They were originally assigned to the Brestwick and have been transferred 4 times. And just our thoughts and prayers are with them. I think we look up into the blue skies and all seems well. And good to be reminded that very near around us all is not well. And so I just appreciate them. And that's it.
Thank you. Supervisor Gogan.
So me and Jill both attended NorCal EMS to try to straighten out their insurance problem and the splitting of the $25,000 between 5 different districts there. And I think we've come up with at least getting that covered and maybe getting a little more done. We're going to talk to Richard about the budget and what we can afford, but I think we made forward progress there. And I've had 2 fish and game commission meetings, both about the same thing, and it's about a beaver dam on Browns Creek that didn't think would be much, but it's turning out to be a lot much. So we're still in the process of figuring out why it happened, why it got torn down. I think everybody in the room thinks it's a travesty, and it was. And then I have one question for Keith about the Humboldt County 50,000 acre feet. That's kind of been behind this guy for a long time. And you talked with the the Board of Supervisors from that district, any discussion about them putting someone on TMC as a board member?
No, we did not discuss that. The past history of that is that HOOPA has always blocked that, and Trinity County's stance has not been terribly favorable to that, but we're always open to look at that discussion. They did not request that. In fact, the last time it came up, Humboldt basically, well, not basically, they stated they wouldn't show up to the meeting unless they were guaranteed to be put onto the TMC. So that kind of made it walk away. For those that don't know, it's very difficult to get put on the TMC as a new agency. You have to have a unanimous vote by all the members, sitting members. At one point, I brought up, well, actually we had a vote to see if we could put the power users, the guys paying the bills, onto the board. And I was the only one in support of that, but at least I got it in front. And then there's been discussions over time period, especially after TAMWAG went to put a stakeholder on. I was in support of putting a voting stakeholder on, but nobody had any interest in that. And then I tried to negotiate putting a non-voting member of TAMWAG style on, and I was the only one in support of that also. So to make a very short question very long, we have not discussed that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Supervisor Gogan?
No, that's it for me.
All right, thank you. And I don't have a lot to report. I did have a North Coast Air Quality Management District Board meeting last week, and the main thing that seems to have come out of that is we're exploring having in-person meetings starting at our next meeting for North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District, so that would be a good thing. And that's all I have to report. We'll move forward to county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request that an item be heard out of order. Do we have any requests to move anything around on the agenda? Seeing none. We'll move to item 5.1, Auditor Controller. Approve a budget adjustment for contributions to other funds, Department 1990, increasing transfers out by $53,888. Approve a budget adjustment for Public Guardian, Department 5105, increasing transfers in by $53,888. And approve a budget adjustment for General Fund Contingency, decreasing appropriations by $53,888. Do we have staff that would like to speak to this item? Are we moving too quickly?
We have some from the Auditor Controller on, but I'm not sure if they're here for this item.
Susie Hawkins, Senior Financial Analyst, Admin Office. Normally, I would defer to the Auditor Controller on this item, but I'll try and give you some information on it. I was not prepared to present it to you today. In fiscal year 2021, so this last year, we moved the Public Guardian budget unit out of the Health, Welfare, Social Services Fund into the General Fund. In doing so and in reconciling the cash balance that they had, Public Guardian had used $53,888 of social services funds to support that program that the general fund needs to transfer back into the social services fund to make them whole for when we transfer them out into the general fund. Is that?
We have the Auditor Controller on if you have any additional
questions. I'll defer to Angie.
Christine, are you there? Okay, I think she's having some technical difficulties.
Okay, well,
If you guys have questions, I can try and answer them.
okay. Any questions from the board?
It sounds like it's just an accounting thing.
It really is, yeah.
I guess we can open this item up to public comment. Do we have any public comment on item 5.1?
I do not have any chats and no raised hands.
So I would make a motion to pass this unless Susie thinks that the auditor controller needs to come back and talk about it, but I think it's a standard issue. That I would move to pass this.
All second for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Susie, just because it's fun to put you on the spot, because you always come through. Why did we move this into general fund in the first place?
Because public guardian is actually a general fund obligation. It's something that we should have, it should have been in the general fund in the beginning. Yeah. And it made it easier for tracking purposes. So now in budgeting, when they need a general fund contribution, we don't have to budget a transfer in and a transfer out. They budget what they need and then the general fund, because they're in the general fund now, the general fund covers the difference through our budgeting process. And then through our budgeting process, which we're currently in the middle of, if we need to cut, then we cut their other general fund departments to balance the budget. But we don't have to, it cuts down on paperwork, basically.
All right. Thank you.
Short.
Any other questions, discussion? We have a motion and a second. So we need to have a roll call vote on this item. Yep.
Motion by Supervisor Gogan, second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay, moving on. County Administrative Office, item 5.2, adopt a resolution establishing salaries and benefits for department heads.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Bringing this forward, this is probably going to be one of many that we'll be moving forward with the implementation of our class and comp. What has caused this compaction throughout the entire county. And what we found, looking at department heads, is we have assistant and deputy department heads making more than our department heads, which makes it kind of difficult to do any type of transition or so what I always forget, succession planning, because there's not a whole lot of motivation to move to a department head position for less money. So what we've done is we've gone through and looked at the entire group as a whole, so it doesn't just benefit one. It's a standard increase, and we've put it at 15% above C-step for the deputies. What that will do is it'll keep the compaction from happening as management and our representatives get increases over the years. It'll continue to it'll move the department heads at the same time, so we won't get into this situation again. And we're looking at other units to do the same thing, because we have had kind of the perfect storm with the class and comp and the increase in minimum wage. It just really compacted everything. So what we're trying to do now is go back and fix what is kind of unjust, I think, because we have, as you see in the staff report, the ag commissioner is making less than their deputy, the auditor controller is making less than their deputy, their sheriff is making less than the under sheriff. So those are positions, we have, those are value positions, important positions, and to recruit people for those positions, I think it's important that we do have a separation between the number ones and number twos. So be happy to answer your questions at this point.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, one question. As a salary position, which I imagine most of these are, or how does it turn out that the undersheriff gets more than the sheriff?
Through the bargaining, elected officials and department heads are non-represented. So when we do the bargaining, our deputy directors are actually in the management category. So it pushes, so they get the same increases as management and unrepresented, where department heads and elected officials are unrepresented, so they don't have a negotiating group. So when we do the negotiations for these other units, it does not affect the elected officials. That's why I think it was last year we tied the Board of Supervisors salaries to the judges, which will start in 22, I believe, because we're having the same problem. It's difficult for the supervisors to give themselves raises, and then you have supervisors with the minimum wage going up. We were going to have supervisors making less than minimum wage, so we tied it to the judges. And this is what we're doing now: is we're tying the department heads to the deputy directors and assistant. So when they go up, consequently the department heads will go up too.
Is there opportunity for the second in charge of the sheriff's department to make more through going to different classes, schoolings, anything like that?
No, because they are a salaried person, so they wouldn't. The deputy 1, 2, 3 doesn't make a difference once you make under sheriff, and it is a salaried position, so they don't collect overtime. So with this fix, the under sheriff would make less than the sheriff.
Thank you.
I will say, and a shout out to the sheriff, he is I think in his total package is the 11th down from the top in the sheriff's department in cost to the county, because he does not take any of his benefit programs, so he just takes his straight salary. So
we're getting a good deal with Sheriff Saxon.
All right, any other questions to staff before we open up public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll open up public comment on item 5.2. We have any comment?
I have no raised hands and no new chats, and I'm seeing no movement towards the podium in the room.
Okay, with that,
I'll move to accept.
I will second that.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Emma, would you pull forward?
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, human resources, item 5.3. Modify the departmental allocation list for the clerk, recorder, assessor's office to read 2, account clerk 1, 2, or accounting technician 1, 2, senior or accountant 1, 2, or program manager, effective July 20th, 2021. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for program manager at A-step is $9,341.
Good morning, Shelley Nelson, HR Director. So the Clerk Recorder Assessor's Office had requested modifying their allocation list for their department, and the particular section is the accounting clerk, accounting tech, accountant classification series by adding a position called the program manager. The office has been without election staff since September 2020, designated staff, I should say. The county has we've run multiple recruitments for these entry-level classifications and have been unsuccessful. With a recall election scheduled for September 14th, 2021, preparation for the gubernatorial election cycle that starts November 2021, and redistricting that must be completed by December 2021, it's important that this office have qualified staff. The office needs an individual who can interpret laws, regulations, including new laws proposed by legislation, and competently developing and implementing policies and procedures based on any of these new laws. And in elections, the laws are frequently changing, so it's very important that they have a qualified individual to assist the department head ensuring the county stays compliant. Recruiting for this higher level and experienced individual will benefit the county as the individual will focus and assist primarily on the functions within the elections division of this office, and there is sufficient funding within our budget to cover this position.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? All right, we'll open item 5.3 to public comment.
I have no raised hands and no new chats, and I don't think anyone in the room is going to make public comment.
Move to adopt 5.3 as presented.
We have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Emma?
Motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, item 5.4. Pursuant to Trinity County Code Section 2.60.410A, authorize hiring candidate number 111394 as a staff services manager at range M241, step E, in Health and Human Services, fiscal effective July 20th, 2021. Approximate cost in salary and benefits per month for a staff services manager at A step is $9,675 and at E step is $11,522.
So Health and Human Services, their fiscal division, ran a recruitment to fill a recent vacancy that they had for staff services manager due to retirement. The applicant that scored the highest amongst the interview panelists has both the education and, excitedly, 27 years combined experience in the same classification with another Northern California county. This department is requesting the board approve offering this individual above A step at E. The salary range and step would commensurate with the employee's training, their experience, which far exceeds the position's minimum requirements. In addition to having this person, I just wanted to highlight that if we bring this person on board, it would provide a very quick and smooth transition.
Any questions? Any public comment on item 5.4?
I have no new chats and no raised hands, and I'm seeing no movement in the chambers.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move to adopt item 5.4 as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Emma?
Motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on, planning and zoning. Item 5.5. Hold an appeal hearing to consider upholding, modifying, or overturning the planning commission's decision to grant an appeal of the planning director's decision to deny an extension under urgency ordinance 1355 for commercial cannabis license number 397 to Jessica Smith, Pirate Farms LLC on assessor's parcel number 020-410-11-00. Project applicant Jessica Smith, Pirate Farms, appellant, planning director Kim Hunter, unknown fiscal impact.
Good morning, Kim Hunter, Building and Planning Director. I'll be presenting this item today. Yeah, sorry for the wordiness of that item. This is an appeal that I have filed regarding the Planning Commission's decision to grant an appeal for an extension, license extension for a commercial cannabis cultivation license. And this is definitely a difficult situation. I think it exemplifies the struggle we have had in the cannabis division under the planning department. And I'm seeking direction mainly on this item and the interpretation of urgency ordinance 1355. On June 10th, the Planning Commission granted appeal P-21-12 for Jessica Smith and directed staff to issue an extension for this CCL. As stated in the attached appeal application into the Planning Commission staff report, the denial of this extension was because the license was not issued on or after January 1st, 2019. Urgency Ordinance 1355, Section 2A1 states, the term of any cannabis cultivation license issued on or after January 1st, 2019, and for which an application to renew such license has been submitted to the county on the effective date of this urgency ordinance, shall be deemed to be extended for the term of this urgency ordinance as provided in paragraph C of this section. CCL 397 was last issued on November 5th, 2018 and expired November 4th, 2019. Therefore, if you go with the conservative interpretation of the language in the urgency ordinance, this license technically was not issued on or after January 1st, 2019, although it was in effect and active during that time. The alternatives to overturning the Planning Commission's decision to grant the appeal would be to grant my appeal, provide direction, and/or provide direction to staff regarding the interpretation of Ordinance 1355. The granting of this appeal and subsequent issuance of an extension letter for CCL 397 will set a precedence for other licenses in this situation. These are licenses that were not issued on or after January 1st, 2019, but are otherwise in good standing. And this is why I am bringing this item to you. Again, this sets precedence, and I'm seeking direction. The department recommendation is overturn the Planning Commission decision and/or provide direction to staff. And with that, I conclude my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
How many do you have that this sets precedent for?
At least around 15.
So, I'm sure we'll hear from the applicant, but so during this period, was our office open and available at full times for those people to come?
It was, it was definitely closures affected during COVID. So staff was available. Our licensees do have had trouble reaching people because we are limited on staffing. So when people do reach out, there is delay, or sometimes I have to send several messages before getting a response from staff. So while the office was open, we definitely know it has been difficult for folks to get through. This license, there were deficiencies in license that needed to be cleared for the site. The applicant is here and the representative to speak. They were making progress on those deficiencies to be reinstated and to get their license issued. They were very close to finishing that up when the urgency ordinance went into effect. So I know I'm a little off topic of your question, but they did make progress with addressing those deficiencies, which is why they were not issued yet in 2020.
So what you're saying is the reason they couldn't do this pay on the 4th was they had deficiencies they had to...
They were working on deficiencies.
Mitigate. When were their deficiencies mitigated?
I would have to look in the file. I know they were in progress, but I don't have a definite answer.
Okay, I'll ask
Look
the
that up.
applicant that.
Yes.
Did they pay or attempt to pay right after they had mitigated their deficiencies?
They actually were first screened out for an extension early in the year for not paying their renewal fees. They did pay those fees during the 30-day window. And then that application was rescreened, and that's when we noticed it hadn't been issued on or after January 1st, 2019. But they did pay the fees during the allowance for the 30-day window for those folks who had not paid.
So I want to be crystal clear here. If they had come in on the 4th, you wouldn't have accepted their money because they were deficient.
If they came in on the 4th?
Then November 4th, when their license was expired.
Oh, no, we would have accepted it November 4th.
Okay.
It hadn't been paid by December 9th, 2020, when the urgency ordinance went into effect.
But you said they had deficiencies that they had to mitigate before.
We didn't issue the license. It doesn't mean we're not going to take in the renewal and the application to keep them in good standing.
So let's play a little game of hypothetical here. So if you would have taken the money but didn't issue the new license, would you still have the same stand?
No, because the license wasn't issued.
Yeah, but that's what your point is that since the license wasn't issued before this January date.
Before the December 9th, before the January 1st, 2019 date.
Right.
It was in effect. It expired in November.
Right, but what I'm saying is you would have taken the money but still not issued the license. So they still wouldn't have had a license on January whatever. They just would have paid. So would you still say they didn't have a license, or since they paid, even though they didn't have a license, you would accept this as moves through?
Yeah. So the previous policy, so there was a memo issued on December 8th, 2020, the day before the urgency ordinance was in effect, went into effect. And that's where we clearly stated if you have an inactive license, you've expired. That's where that was set up. Now prior to that, so policy was established regarding inactive licenses at that time. Prior to that, if somebody was working on deficiencies and they wanted to come in and submit their renewal and pay their fees to keep their license active, even if it expired, we would take the fees and allow them to move forward clearing those deficiencies because they'd been licensed in the program. So up until December 2020, yes, we would have taken the renewal payment had it come in prior to that and worked with them to come into compliance. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
But as far as we know, they were working to come in compliance.
Yes.
So the whole thing hinges on the fact they didn't pay the money before that.
Either the deficiencies weren't cleared. Yeah. There's two things going on. The renewal payment hadn't been received, and they were working on the deficiencies. So either way, if they paid the fees and they still had deficiencies, we wouldn't issue the license until those were cleared.
But you did state that if they had paid the fees, then they could have gone forward and worked on that.
Right.
And then they would be eligible today to keep moving forward.
Yes, and that is the argument that the Planning Commission, felt was the basis of their decision.
So, but the crux is the only thing that is holding them is the fact they didn't pay the fees by November 4th.
I still disagree on that, because if they had deficiencies, they wouldn't have been issued. Those deficiencies were not cleared, and I will check, I have the file with me. I do not believe that the deficiencies were cleared to have an issued license until after later So,
Well, I understand that part that you stated, unless I'm misunderstanding it.
and I may have misspoke, but,
That if they would have paid the money and worked on the deficiencies, and then when they complete those deficiencies today, they would be licensed and we wouldn't be in this appeal process.
I'm struggling, maybe I'm missing something here. They have deficiencies and they didn't pay fees. There were two issues.
Right.
So,
No, I get that part.
yeah, they were first screened out for fees.
But if they would have paid on 11/4,
Right.
come in and pay and say, okay, we have to work on these deficiencies before we get our license in our hand.
Right.
But you said earlier that that would put them in standing and hold their license open until they got the deficiencies. So when the UO came along, you stated, unless I misunderstood, that once they got those deficiencies, you would have given them their license after the fact.
That is not what I'm trying to convey.
Okay. So
No,
what
the
you're saying
issue here is the January 1st, 2019, on or after. They've paid their fees, they've cleared their deficiencies. It's the January 1st, 2019.
If they didn't pay, in the back of my mind, this is important for me to get straight.
Okay.
I'm sorry for wasting everybody's time here. But so if they paid their money and didn't do their deficiencies by the January 1st, you would have still pulled their license and say, you don't fit under the UO.
If they would have paid
Their money
and cleared.
and not have cleared their deficiencies by January 1, you would have said, sorry, you're out.
I'm not sure what would have happened January. I don't know what the policy, what was happening in also January 1st, 2019. I don't know what the policies were. We have active licenses that are still working on things. We wouldn't have pulled the license, they just wouldn't have been issued a new one.
Well, it would have been January of 20, but yeah.
Well, January of 20, had their fees been paid and their deficiencies been cleared?
Not cleared.
Not cleared. No, we're not issuing urgency, or we're not issuing extension letters for licenses where deficiencies aren't cleared.
By January, okay.
Yes.
Think I get it.
Sorry about that.
This seems so intricate with many moving parts as you change up kind of the scenario. Of the other 15, are any of them this intricate? Or maybe you don't know that?
I don't know. I have a guesstimate on how many fall into this January 1st, 2019, otherwise in good standing category. They're all each have quite a story.
Okay.
I have to say, it's very unusual to pick up a file and not have an interesting history. There's a few. But I would say, yeah, probably.
Any other questions, staff, before we open it up to the public?
So just before I step away from the podium, yeah, it is a very, Supervisor Cox, you're exactly correct. It's a very intricate situation, very complex, and seeking direction. These folks have done a lot of work. They put investments in it, and they're, would like to help them out, but I want to make sure I'm making the right decision in regards to the urgency ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, from a matter of the process, does the applicant have a representative that's going to get extra time?
I believe so.
Or maybe I'm looking at Margaret.
That's correct, yeah, the applicant got an opportunity.
10 minutes, I hear. I won't take your full 10 minutes.
All right, thank
This is a pretty simple one. I don't think it's very intricate, actually. I'm going to go through a timeline of this license. First of all, excuse me, on our right, Flora representative for CCL 397, a license holder that's been in this program since early 2018. A license holder that's located in Xenia, and talking about 2020, let's talk about evacuations and sicknesses and everything imaginable that happened to that part of the county happened to this licensee. So starting at January 12th, 2018, there was a temporary license issued by Trinity County to cultivate, and that turned into a full license in November of 2018 that was valid through November 4th of 2019.
Okay, hang on.
I'm sorry, I'll go slow. And I apologize, this was printed out for the Planning Commission hearing, and it slipped my mind for this one. I thought we were on the 7th. So January 12th, 2018, first Trinity County license issued. November 5th of later that year, once more another license issued, this time for an annual renewal on November of 2019. December 16th, 2018, they got their first Cdfa license issued.
I'm sorry, back up one time, because I thought you did an 11/5/18, and then I heard 19, and I got a little bit lost.
Sorry, yeah. So November 5th, 2018, a license was issued by Trinity County. It was valid through November 4th, 2019.
Got it.
So it was a year, yep, it was a year long.
Okay.
About a month after that, their first state license was issued. Let's fast forward to November of 2019 when a renewal was submitted and paid for in November of 2019. About 10 days later, they got their first provisional license by Cdfa issued. In February of 2020, approximately 3 months after their renewal was submitted, deficiencies were issued on their Trinity County license. This included additional information on their water source, which are rain catchment ponds, which we provided within a month of that notice. They wanted a new ID. We submitted that within a month of that notice. There's a well for domestic use on that property, so we needed to submit the well completion report for that. That was submitted within a month of that notification. Building permit issues cleared within 2 months of that notification. And the one thing that really held up this license from being issued, these deficiencies that were just discussed by Director Hunter, was a septic finalization. In March of 2020, about 5 days after the county closed their office, Environmental Health Director Christy Anderson let us know that no inspections were going to happen anymore, which meant that this septic couldn't get finalized. So this person by March, this licensee by March of 2020, did everything that they could in their power to clear the deficiencies. It wasn't until June of 2020 when Environmental Health was finally able to go out to do that septic inspection. So Trinity County did not issue this license based on that septic deficiency, which we can talk on another time of why septic should not hold up licenses, but c'est la vie, we're here now. July 9th, 2020, there was another site visit scheduled to finalize the septic and building permits. In August of 2020, we finally received notice that they were all finalized. So we're going in this timeline and following simply deficiencies before we issue a license. In August of 2020, this license should have been issued. A day after we received notice that those are finalized, the August complex fires began, and the licensee evacuated for a good chunk of that fall. Now in November, beginning of November, around that time, Flora did attempt to pay their 2021 fees and get their renewal in. The department was open, the department was closed, we mailed in the fees, they got mailed back to us, bad address. I don't think that's really important at this point. We've all agreed, Director Hunter and I have agreed that attempts were made to be compliant like many other licensees in 2020. And then that leads us up to December of 2020 and this urgency ordinance that we're talking about today. I understand that only Supervisor Groves was here when that was passed, but I also appreciate the rest of the board's understanding of what the real purpose behind that urgency ordinance is, because it's still active. And that is because of the fires and COVID and everything else crazy happening in 2020 with the department shut down. Relief was supposed to be granted to both the department in order for them to get their ducks in a row with renewals, as well as the licensees, because we were all affected by that. In this spring, due to the payment issue in November, before that policy came out and said, that's it, no more payments, we're not doing it, we were able to get the money back in to the planning department, received, accepted, and we all thought everything was fine then. It gets rescreened, and we are noticed that because a license was not issued in 2019, they do not qualify under this urgency ordinance. And we're arguing against this today, and what the Planning Commission very correctly decided was this is not the licensee's fault at all, that this license was not issued in 2019. In fact, I would be, based on my experience of 4 years working in this program, I would be shocked if a license was issued within a month of us turning in a renewal, which is what you're looking at to get to the end of 2019. They had a valid license through 11 months of that year. They've kept their Cdfa valid so that they don't fall behind in that, hoping that the department pays attention to this. Now, talking about people in this similar situation, I can tell you Flora has 7 to 8 other people in this exact situation. They've paid all their fees in 2019. They paid all their fees in 2020. Heck, some of them have paid all their fees in 2021. We're talking $12,000 to $18,000, and the department will not move on them because they never hit print in 2019. Deficiencies long cleared. State licenses long issued. The administrative process that we have was followed correctly. And in discussions with Director Hunter, there are several other, as I said, licensees in this situation. With urgency ordinance denials, we've been able to work together, and I appreciate that from the department, to keep a lot of things out of the commission and out of your time. However, we disagree on this, and that's why we're here today. I believe that the urgency ordinance was made to help people in this exact situation. And just because the department was not able to hit print in 2019 should not keep these people from being outside of the program. A cultivation site that's been existing since their license in 2018. Somebody who's continuing to stay compliant in this program. And it's really up to you today of how that interpretation goes. Do we continue to strong-arm people out of this program? Say, you know what, we don't care, you've been here for a while, we don't want your money anymore, we don't want your taxes anymore, good luck in some other industry. That's how I see this going down if you grant this appeal. You're going to be looking these small business owners in the eyes and saying, we don't want you here in Trinity County. Even though this entire cannabis program was built for people like this. Small families, small farms, and the urgency ordinance was literally made for relief like this. So I do appreciate your time today. I'm happy to answer any questions around compliance on this site. I think I've made it very clear that compliance was achieved in early 2020, and from the county's end, it was not able to be followed through to be issued before the department's policy on December 8th and the urgency ordinance on December 9th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of the consultant before she steps down? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will open this item up to public comment.
I have no raised hands and no chats. If there's anyone in the room, now's the time.
Good morning, Chair, Supervisors, Lisa Wright from Lewiston. Just want to re-emphasize that the Planning Commission analyzed this thoroughly. I don't know if you had a chance to review the YouTube clip. And they came to a unanimous decision that really the only reason this applicant, this permit holder, didn't have their license in 2020 was because the department was closed or for whatever reason didn't hit print. Again, like Anna said, all the deficiencies were cleared by the summer of 2020 and no license was issued. They had that license all through 2019 till November, paid their fee, did their renewal 2019. 3 months later, got the deficiency notice, cleared that. The department cleared it, Environmental Health, by August, I believe, of 2020, but no license. So from August till that memo came out in December,
The planning department had an opportunity and should have. All the fees were paid, all the deficiencies were cleared. So I think now trying to stick to issued on or after, I think it's more appropriate that they held a license on or after. Maybe that's just a nuance. The director takes broad discretion in many other areas outside of the urgency ordinance, including coming up with this 1218 memo without consulting the board that licenses effective immediately if they weren't renewed, couldn't be renewed. That never came before the board. There's broad discretion in many other areas, so I don't know why this has been picked out as something that needs further clarification, but it has. And I think that it's quite clear that the urgency ordinance was not intended to penalize people, but rather to help them through a process that they didn't have a license because planning hadn't issued their license. They paid all their fees, they cleared their deficiencies. In 2020, should have had that license before the urgency ordinance even went into effect. So I urge you to please deny the appeal of the director, direct staff to issue the license for this and other situations that are similar. Thank you so much.
Morning, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Tom Blanco, Douglas City. This is kind of two issues. One, it's the actual appeal itself for Jessica Smith, which I think should be denied. Her license should go forward. This comes to you with a 4-0 ruling from the Planning Commission, I believe, or 5. I don't remember how many people were there that voted, but I know it was unanimous. But it's also direction about how to apply the urgency ordinance to situations like this. And again, I think the urgency ordinance is designed, A, to relieve the back pressure that was on staff. There's no question 2020 was a very challenging year. We had the fires, we had the pandemic, the office was closed a lot. So staff needed relief, and that's what I think the urgency ordinance did. But so too did the applicants, especially applicants at the far reaches of the county, doing their best to meet the deadlines, do the compliance, but finding office closed, or they couldn't get their money in, or they couldn't get the inspection they needed. I see the urgency ordinance as addressing both those things. So not only do I think you should deny this appeal, I think you should ideally explain that this is the appropriate use of the urgency ordinance, what the Planning Commission did, and allow the director to, for these couple of lingering licenses that are out there, we're in July, let's issue these things and move on to, you know, our transition and our new licenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Jay Christ, Hayfork. I'm not going to get into the details of the technicalities of any of this because I think everybody before me did an incredible job. I would urge you guys at some point to watch the Planning Commission meetings. Even for nothing but the fact that it's incredibly hard to be part of this process, be a licensee, and sit there and not be embarrassed at just the level of, it's a repetitive circus, and we got a program that's I think not even half full. We've been licensed since 16, 17. I can tell you that until we got our CUP this year, we had never been licensed non-stop from one year to another. Never. Not one time. I would like to think that I have an incredible support group around me that keeps us going through this process, but you certainly can't expect everybody to have an entourage of biologists and consultants and lawyers that are your friends and work with you. That's like, you can't need that to keep a license. The idea was to get people licensed. I don't know when it shifted that we're spending more time and effort working on finding tiny technicalities to kick people out of the program. But I know it's painstakingly hard to get anything out of this office. So when you see people that are checking these boxes and getting through this, I don't honestly care what the reasoning is for somebody, oh, I couldn't do this or take this long. If you're trying, you're better than the other 4,000 people in this county growing that aren't trying. You're paying taxes, you're in track and trace, you have state licenses. Realistically, you've probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to this point playing this game with the county. I love that we see people working hard at the county. I just wish we could be working hard to filling those 500 slots. And, time and time again, we're seeing the same question. What is a licensee supposed to do when you've done everything and you can't get your license? We're all on a wall here. So I really hope you guys are able to see the Planning Commission has agreed to every single appeal, virtually unanimously on every decision. So it would be great for that to be passed down to staff, and you guys have that opportunity here. I'm sorry it's wasting everyone's time, but here's where we are. So if we could send that sentiment, go back 6 years, please come to licensing program, get your stuff regulated. It would be great, so we can all go back to work and you guys can get back to some real issues. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Emma, is there anyone on Zoom?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Okay, with that, I guess we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
I have one question of Kim
For clarification.
clarification. So the applicant says they paid when they submitted their, and this is back in
November 2019.
Right.
Yeah,
So
and
they
the
did
fees,
pay.
they did pay, it was the fees in 2020 that had not been paid. Yet their license hadn't been issued, so, yeah, in 2019. So they've kept it active, and they paid their 2020 fees during that 30-day period.
Okay. All right. Yep.
All right, I would like to make a motion to grant the appeal finding that the appellant was in compliance, license number 397, parcel number 0204101.
I think we got an issue there. If you're fine, the appellant in this is Kim. So if you're
to grant the appeal,
granting the appeal, you will be taking their license.
Okay, let's go with the, I'm just following the Planning Commission's language here.
Different appeal.
So I would like to grant the appellant their license.
They're not the appellant here. You're going to have to
Deny the appeal.
I'd like to deny the appeal and say that they were in compliance and were unable to get the process done in a timely manner through no fault of their own.
Okay, we have a motion.
And do I need to state the license number and the ABN number?
That's okay. I have it on the
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about my miss.
We have a motion.
I will second, but in this, we're going to have to give direction to staff on the future if this passes. So, Mr. Chair, would you like us to have discussion after it passes, or Margaret, what would be the appropriate?
It has to be before it passes.
Has to be before it passes. So, my thought is since the applicant actually paid and submitted, at that point, then to me, even though they didn't have their license in hand on that January 2020 date, the reason they didn't have it was because we didn't submit it. And then when we got to looking at the place, then in February, and And I'm assuming these dates are correct and you don't have any issue with the dates.
I have no issue with the dates.
Okay, so in February, when we get out there and look at it, then we give them a list of things to do. If we were Johnny on the spot and we showed up there on November 5th and said, these are the things you can do to get your license, they probably wouldn't have been able to do them all, but they would have done them in a quicker process. So my feeling is if the applicant is submitted and paid, then that, even though they don't have a new license in, that will qualify them to stay in the program. That's my thought.
My thought on this issue personally is it looks like the main reason there wasn't a license issued after January 19 wasn't because the applicant failed. It was because everything was, there was issues beyond their control. I mean, when you have to wait 6 months for a septic inspection, and then as soon as you get your septic inspection done, you get evacuated for the next 3 months, it can cause issues with paperwork. And my question is, how do we determine whether this was the county's fault or the applicant's fault? Why this license wasn't issued? And so that would be the question to me. If it was because the county didn't get it done in time, then I think that the license should be issued. If it was because the applicant didn't do their part, then that's a different story.
Which will bring us more appeals because...
And I imagine that we will be hearing more. That's a lot to put on Kim's shoulders to determine if it was the county's fault or the applicant's fault. And so I would imagine if we do move forward with this, we're going to hear the rest of them. Go ahead.
I'm empathetic to both sides. I'm empathetic to Kim, who stands here and appeal because she doesn't want to do the wrong thing and then have that snowball into something that has larger repercussions. Empathetic to those who are trying to get their everything required, all those boxes checked on time, and then we have COVID and we have fires. And it really was a perfect storm. So if it means that in denying this appeal, and I hate the way that sounds to Kim, right? I think that she's just really trying to say, hey, I don't want to be in this alone. You know, I want other eyes and other thoughts to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and I appreciate that, and feel for you. But if it means that then we have to hear more appeals, then I think we have to hear more appeals, because each person's situation is important. And I'm willing, you know, to hear them. It takes time to read and think. Each time I read through these, I spent 13 hours on Saturday reading and trying to understand. And it predates me in ways that are complex and difficult, and it just requires asking the question that sometimes gets asked poorly, which I hope you heard my apology. But it is complex, and we do have to find our way out. And I think that we can. It may take a little bit of time, but I think that everyone's situation is important. So I don't like the way deny Kim's appeal sounds in text, but I think that in heart we're probably all on the same page.
Vice Chair Frazier?
Yes.
May I make a comment?
Yes, you may.
The direction that Keith provided would be extremely helpful. I think that was the will of the board, that if an application was submitted and fees were paid within 2019, I believe, that sets a threshold for me to evaluate.
Can we go a little bit further with that, saying that license fees and that could be for 2019 or an application for 2020 license for fees and application were submitted in 2019, because that's the issue we have here. They were applying for 2020. Basically, their license expired in November 19, so they're applying for 2020 license in 2019. And so if we had that license application and payment in 2019, as long as it's understood that that could be for a 19 or 20 license, I would be fine with that direction.
Yeah, especially in the case where the license expired later in the year.
Yes.
In 2019, yes.
Is that?
I'm trying to follow what you said. I'm not sure I'm not disagreeing, I'm just.
Okay, well, the issue we have here is because the urgency ordinance says if you have a license issued on or after January 2019, and their license expired in November of 2019, so they were actually applying for a 2020 license. So that's, I think, why we have the issue here. They already had the license at January of 19, but then their renewal was for 20. So if we give the direction that if they had applied and paid their fees on or after January 2019, I guess on or after January 19 covers 20 also. So I think that I'm okay with Keith's direction if the rest of the board is.
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second and lots of discussion, direction. Any subsequent motions or further discussion? Hearing none, Emma, will you pull the board?
Motion by Supervisor Groves to deny the appeal. Second by motion by Supervisor Gogan. Apologies. Second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the direction.
Thank you. All right.
I will be right back.
Okay, we lost our director for a second. Would anybody be interested?
Said she was going to be right back.
All right, that's just, I guess I can read this. I'm sure she can hear. She's in the lobby. Item 5.6, hold an appeal hearing to consider upholding, modifying, or overturning the Planning Commission's decision to make a determination for a mitigated negative declaration in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act and approve a conditional use permit for Trinity Equipment and Materials, LLC, on Assessor's parcel numbers 024-220-56-00, project applicant Thomas Polanco, appellant Citizens for Proper Community Planning, unknown fiscal impact.
Yes, this is another appeal for you today. This is an appeal of a adoption of a mitigated negative declaration and conditional use permit. This was before the Planning Commission in June, I believe. Sorry, the June meeting. The proposed application, or excuse me, the proposed team commercial cannabis project is located within the town of Weaverville. The project site is at 311 Industrial Parkway in the Trinity Alps Business Park. Primary site access is provided via Industrial Parkway off of 299. The proposed project would develop the property with facilities and infrastructure to accommodate cannabis nursery, distribution, and type 6 non-volatile manufacturing operations. There's a summary of the operations in your staff report, so I won't go into details. The applicant, their legal representative, and their consultant are available to answer any specifics on the project. The application and CEQA initial study mitigated neg deck also included proposed testing and processing operations, which were not included in the approved conditional use permit. Proposed testing operations for the site did not meet the criteria currently established in the code section 17.43C for cannabis testing facility regulations. Processing operations are not currently recognized or provided in the Trinity County zoning code as a use, although provisions are included in state law for this type of operation. So that's just something we have not addressed in our ordinance yet, and so use requirements for that use are not established in code. So those two operation components were left out of the land use entitlement, with the idea that should the testing provisions ever be amended and this site would qualify, and or adding processing requirements in code, and that use be addressed, that they could later amend the use permit. But the environmental is done and completed, so should those uses be allowed at the site, they could move forward. Okay, several specific findings were made. I was actually not in attendance at this meeting, but I was listening online. There was quite a bit of discussion on this topic, and one of the issues were that the findings were read into the record. They were not included in the resolution or staff report regarding the findings that are required by specific code sections. Those code sections being for the nursery, the manufacturing and processing. So those, staff realized that, and we were able to read those findings into the record, which was done at the meeting and is an acceptable alternative that is used when certain situations arise such as this. So findings were made in accordance with the code and the conditional use permit process. Staffers also, something that came up in some of the correspondence, and I've mentioned this before regarding areas where cultivation is prohibited. We often refer to those as opt-outs or carve-outs. Weaverville is in the Trinity County Cultivation Ordinance 17.43. Weaverville water district boundaries are included as a area prohibited for cannabis cultivation. That does not preclude other cannabis uses, and we touched on this before in some of the opt-out discussions. It's just commercial cannabis cultivation. It does not apply to nursery uses, processing, or manufacturing facilities. So there is an allowed use. These uses are allowed, and they are provided for in code in specific unit developments, which the Trinity Alps Business Park is zoned as a specific unit development. However, it has industrial and heavy commercial uses that are allowed in that lower area, and some even in the upper area of the business park. The lower area down by the creek is much more industrial centered than the upper level that you see with the Performing Arts Center, the HHSA building, and the other in Shasta College. That's more office related. More intensive uses are allowed where this parcel is located. In fact, a nursery operation, a CUP was approved, and that was not initiated, so it has since expired. However, there's already been a land use entitlement for nursery uses approved in this area on an adjacent parcel to the site we're talking about today. So the other thing I do want to mention is that our industry needs a large-scale distribution, and nurseries are very critical to the success of our commercial cannabis program. In past distribution proposals, we heard the comment, staff, that a distribution facility, a larger, more broad operation should be located in industrial areas. We heard that very clearly from a past project that proposed distribution. This site is in an industrial area, and the prior activities in this area included a batch plant and heavy industrial uses associated with rock crushing facilities. And there's very industrial uses in this area. The importance of the distribution and nursery is to make sure that our licensed cultivators can move product and have a source that they can trust, and that's local. Also with the nursery, if you're in the metric program and state licensed, you have to have an approved nursery provide you the plants to cultivate. So these uses support our cannabis program and our licensees. They're very vital. In the case of distribution, it's like having a dairy farm without the dairy and be able to, you know, move that product. I mean, it's just essential to the flow and the distribution and the movement of product. It's very critical. So I will stop there. I know there's a lot to say by the appellant and the project applicant and the representative. So I will stop there and answer any questions that you have, just in case I missed something.
Any questions of staff before we move on?
I do have questions for Margaret. There's going to be a discussion on standing and appealing this this level with no previous comments. Could you give us a rundown on standing and the ability to appeal?
That's a very broad question, so it is a process. So typically in these types of processes, there is first a preliminary matter that needs to be carried, which is appealing to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission renders a decision and you're eligible to appeal to the board level. In order to appeal, there has to be a specific action that you are appealing, so there has to be a discretionary action taken by the planning director in order to get to that point. But I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have about this one.
Well, maybe I'll wait until after I hear the argument.
I would like to add that, yes, there was no public comment received regarding the CEQA, the mitigated NAGDAC. It was published in the paper. All the filings were made. We went above and beyond by publishing the notice in the paper of the opening of the 30-day comment period for CEQA. There was no comment in opposition at the Planning Commission regarding the project either, or written comments to the Planning Commission opposing the project at that level.
I guess I would follow up, Margaret, that with that scenario, is a person allowed to make an appeal that has not made comments or had opposition in previous meetings?
No, in order to be eligible to appeal this up to this level and to the court level, you would have to have been a participant in that process and provided comments.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I speak?
I was trying to think, yeah, you will, I'm assuming you're the counsel for the appellant?
I am.
Okay.
Yes, I'm Tim Wood. I represent the citizens for proper planning who appeal this matter. And let me just speak to the issue that was just raised, standing. You know, you hear from attorneys all kinds of legal defenses like exhaustion of administrative remedies and those kinds of things, and those are great arguments to make to a court. And I'll be happy to address those issues if that's where the county wants to go. The important thing is raising issues to the extent and when they become available. They were not, my clients were not aware of this project. Maybe they should have been more vigilant. By the way, my clients are a variety of citizens of Weaverville and surrounding areas, including Lewiston, that are just concerned about good planning. And I think that's an interest we all should have, both in the cannabis world and otherwise. The letter, the notice of appeal makes clear there's really kind of 3 different areas which are of concern. One is just the fundamental lack of planning. No one will argue that the county doesn't have an adequate general plan. That's why you've embarked on the hiring of a consultant to address that issue. And I applaud you for that. At this point, though, and in the absence of an adequate general plan, you can't make general plan consistency findings. Now, we can argue about that, and I appreciate that county council will stake a different position on that issue. That's fine. I raise it because I think the law is clear in that way. Secondly, on the issue of general plan consistency, there's really no analysis at all that's been done by staff for the Planning Commission to look at general plan objectives and policies and make a determination of consistency. There really are very few, if any, such objectives and policies because, if you look at the county history, the original land use element was pretty much scrapped in 2001, if not before. The Weaverville Community Plan, is hardly referred to in the staff report. And in any event, there's no analysis of the text of that plan. You can't conclude consistency without some analysis. Now, I hear it's read into the record. Well, okay. I don't believe this board's seen it. I haven't seen it. No one's been able to view it at this point. General plan consistency is a huge issue. The other issues raised in the original letter are environmental review. And I'm not going to go into the detail, but a big concern really is that the environmental document kind of goes through and at least broadly addresses most of the big issues. One major omission, though, is the growth-inducing impact of this project. The fact that industrial uses are permitted in the lower level of the business park is not contested. But the fact of the matter is we've got a really community-changing cannabis project, which, if approved, will likely have growth-inducing impacts and encourage similar kinds of activities. The entire lower SUD area, I can envision, I think it's reasonable to envision, will be the county cannabis park. That's right next to R1 zoning. That's right next to the new multi-million-dollar health clinic that's being completed. That's within a stone's throw of TPAC and other public facilities. It goes back to planning. There hasn't been adequate planning, and that's one of the consequences. Now, there's something else that's come up, and I apologize for bringing this up late, and the board might want to, consider it for a bit before acting, but it's a serious issue that came up in recent days, some information about which just came to my attention this morning. I'm going to present a letter to the clerk for your consideration. So again, I apologize. This isn't my preferred approach to these kinds of matters. This is an important issue that just came to my attention that is fundamental to the board's decision in this matter. Basically, as many of you know, this project, infrastructure for this development, the business park, was funded by an EPA grant back in 1990 or 1991. And what I've laid out there is the fact that the funding must have been approved based on that existing business plan, which could not have contemplated commercial cannabis. I mean, it was federally prohibited, it was prohibited in the state of California, it just was not a possibility. Moreover, what I found as late as this morning is that the EPA has a continuing interest in that project, and for up to 50 years, unless and until they decide, within their sole discretion, that they no longer have an interest in the property and in the project. And what this kind of boils down to is that the federal regs that govern these grants make clear that if there are unauthorized uses, the grant recipient has liability for the amount of the grant and interest to date. What that translates to, in this case, over 30 years, depending on the precise funding amount, I understand it's about 1.7 million, but assuming interest at 2%, that's a $3.1 million potential liability. Unless and until, the grant agency, EDA, says, hey, we no longer have an interest. It's my understanding they have not. So this is another layer that wasn't brought to anyone's attention. I don't know if county staff has done due diligence on this previously. That should have been done. It just came to my attention. It's an issue that I want to bring to your attention because if the project is approved, notwithstanding general plan issues, Weaverville, community plan issues, CEQA issues, and the lack of findings of fact, actual facts in support of the findings that are required under the code, the county could have a liability here that the taxpayers would foot the bill on. The project proponent could have a liability here as well. I want to back up to one issue, and that's the carve-out area in Weaverville. The commercial cannabis ordinance defines cultivation. It's the only place in your code that defines cultivation. It includes the word growing. The other code sections do not. The reference by staff to a prior project is really irrelevant to what your code says. And so what's proposed here, albeit not growing plants to maturity, just in the form of a nursery, it's a cultivation site for nursery purposes. That's what your code says on its face. There's no ambiguity. There's no kind of creative arguments to circle around that, unless and until the board wants to modify the carve-out area for Weaverville by ordinance. That's what you're faced with, unless you want to just set that aside and kind of look the other way, notwithstanding the clear language there. So to summarize, my clients just want to have good planning. They want the county to be transparent. It is regrettable that they and I were not aware of the Planning Commission proceedings. If you want to send this back to the Planning Commission to take a look at some of these issues, that's fine, that makes sense. But the EDA grant issue is a core issue that I urge you to take under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Tom Blanco. I am the applicant and I guess the appellee in this case. Just a threshold matter before we get into the actual substance. This applies to all appeals in general. We don't really have a format in the code for how appeals should be handled, so you just get everything in the packet, which means I see the appellant's arguments the same time you do, and I don't have time to respond in writing, so you get over the weekend what the appellant says, but not what I get to see, because I didn't get to comment on that. So I would encourage us moving forward, or I guess it's a code level thing, establish some kind of briefing protocol so that the appellee can comment on what the appellant says. But here we are. This is not news down here. This has been an approved location for cannabis distribution, manufacturing since 2018. This has been an actively approved nursery location since 2018. The other nursery application has expired, I believe, just a few months ago, but it was approved down there. And those ordinances were not challenged, and that was part of proper planning. They happened at the Planning Commission. I followed that intimately, knowing that distribution and manufacturing were on the list of projects I wanted to see and I wanted to be participating in. I was at all the Planning Commission meetings in this room where we discussed, hey, what's the appropriate location? Where are some appropriate places? The SUD in Weaverville was always one of those locations. Unlike so much of what we see with cannabis planning, this is not a situation where, hey, here's an ongoing cannabis operation. Let's design the law so that this fits. That's not what happened here. It was, where is an appropriate location for these kinds of uses? We came up with those at the Planning Commission. Those came through to the board. They were approved. And then we acquired an interest in one of those locations. The way planning is supposed to happen. That took then several years to get the plan laid out, the CEQA analysis done. SHN is really who did the MND. We presented a draft, like I think you see in most of the situations with conditional use permits or when a CEQA document is necessary. But SHN really took ownership of this and marshaled through a very robust environmental analysis. One that, when it was published at the clearinghouse, only got very few comments from Department of Fish and Wildlife, which were accepted. So environmentally speaking, I'm confident in that mitigated neg deck that was approved for down there. As far as the new federal EDA, I haven't heard anything about that. I haven't researched anything into it. I have researched the title on our parcel there. There's no federal interest, easement. There's nothing on the property title from the feds. And even if there was, that somehow we're going to see some federal agency come and try and restrict state legal cannabis activity is absurd. If it does, team will underwrite whatever the county is facing on there. But I assure you that will not happen. I'm here to answer any questions I suppose you have, but again, I ask that you do what the Planning Commission did and approve. Deny the appeal, allow this project to go forward. This is good for Trinity County. Not only does it bring the jobs that will happen down here, but it helps ensure that the jobs that exist in all the independent farms in Trinity County have the means to reach the market. Trinity County has notoriously been a resource county, and one thing the general plan does say, let's bring value added to our resource products here, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here. Rather than be at the whim of distribution and manufacturing elsewhere in the city, let's have that here so our local farmers have their own say in and their own ability to participate in this value-added part of the economy. So anyway, if you have any questions, I'm here or I'll be there. Otherwise, please deny this and let this project move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, I have a question.
Yeah.
If I may, Chair. So you said the team, I assume that's your acronym?
It is.
Okay.
Trade equipment and materials.
Okay. You would underwrite the $3.1 million liability?
If the feds come for any kind of lot, and I think we have to do that anyway. I think that's part of the application for a license. But in case it's not, we will specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret, get some clarity on that? Is that the way that works?
There is an indemnity provision that is required for all licenses, so yes, that would have been required anyway.
And the prior permitting of the similar facility that was going to go there went through no federal,
Never went into effect at all.
That CUP was active for 3 years without challenge.
Any further questions for the applicant or? Seeing none. All right, with that, we can open it up to public comment.
I'm Dave Potter. I'm just a local citizen, but surprisingly, of all things, I wrote the grant to get this industrial park approved. So I would be in contact with Bob Nash, Dina Sasan, who approved this thing for us, to do a pristine industrial park in Trinity County, and you've all seen the success of this. The lower area had complications because of the water problems down there as far as building, but as it moves along, there is a possibility of getting businesses down there with the approval of all those sources that created the water district down there. And we are aware that our water district in Trinity, Weaverville Water District, didn't want any marijuana in the district. That's obvious, and those are the kind of things we need to follow through with. I've been trying to contact all of these people that approved it to give you some background on it, and I just heard about this going on about 3 days ago, so I haven't gotten any follow-up, but as soon as I get word, I'm going to get it out to you. I'll leave it to that, and if you have any questions of me, have at it.
No, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chris Bolden. I'm a Weaverville resident, and I'm speaking for Dana Ryan, also a Weaverville resident, on his behalf as he's in court this morning. I'm speaking about the industrial park that was developed for industry of its time to bring in jobs. At that time, there were no thoughts of marijuana, drugs, or armed guards. With this being said, our general plan needs updated before a huge marijuana plant is allowed. This was fast-tracked and passed, so the public wasn't able to have any input. We need to plan good for this community, and in my opinion, this is most definitely not. Health and Human Services, Shasta College, Performing Arts Center, Outpost Church, Trindell Insurance, Redding Rancheria Medical Clinic, and Tough Gym are at the top of this armed guard project. I'm pretty sure if you had a survey of just these few neighbors, you would get a feel of how others felt health, welfare, and safety. I don't think you have considered this planning and planning board. Let's do the right planning, amend the general plan, and have community input before a major decision that will affect us all. The old saying, do unto others as you want done unto you. If you have the pressure of opt-in or opt-out, go out for your citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning again, Anna Wright, Weaverville, and I want to speak as a consultant today and start with the process that we've already harped on. I know you've heard it. When it comes to CUPs of this standard, there is a process to comment, to bring your grievances forward in a public setting, and that time has now passed. Only when the Trinity Journal published this on the front page of the newspaper did people start to be concerned. Some imagery surrounding this project. Armed guards, I have to laugh a little bit because it's definitely not allowed with cannabis, and it's definitely not necessary in this regard. We're talking about an establishment where licensed cultivators, the ones you have in your county, can stay in the county to get their nursery, to get their clones and their starts for the season. And then when all is said and done for their year, they can also stay in this county to use distribution. At this point in time, I know of one nursery license that's successfully operating, and we all support him, but there's also room to join him in that venture. The manufacturing part of it is a plus. Just to let you know, it's a value add to everything. So when a cultivator is looking to sell their final product from the season to the distributor, that distributor can not only buy the final product, they can buy all the trim that's associated, and that can also be then sold to the manufacturing facility, who can use that waste, if you will, properly, once it's tested and approved, to make other cannabis products that are being made in Trinity County. To keep a lot of these activities in Trinity County is incredibly important, not only for this county, not only for the economic development behind this, it's going to bring up to 50 jobs. As a business owner, it's hard to hire right now. It would be great to bring more people into this community. If those 50 employees join up, they have there's 50 families. More opportunities for people to be part of this community in your schools. This follows all good planning protocol and went through all the right, jumped through all the right hoops. Watch the record, watch the planning commission meeting, you'll just see that. It's pretty consistent with the general plan. It follows appropriate zoning and land uses. SUD is appropriate for this. And I'm a little offended on the CEQA comments as Flora helped assist SHN through this process. You can't, if this MND is not satisfactory, good luck with the rest of them coming down the road through the FEIR, because this is the most solid document that you've had in front of you in the past 4 years. CDFA's comments were incorporated, CDFW's comments were incorporated, the FEIR components were incorporated, everything was followed by procedure. I'd really love to see this appeal denied and opportunity for economic development finally in District 2 here at our feet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Jennifer Hill. I am close friends with the Blanco family. Not only are they my friends, but I look up to them. They are stewards of the land. I can guarantee you this project will be to the utmost standards, because cannabis has many, many standards, many protocols. I know they will follow them all. Please allow this community to have a chance to thrive, to let cannabis be a growing industry here. Nurseries are needed, distribution's needed. It's basically non-existent here. Please allow these stewards of the land to take this project and soar with it. This is the perfect zoning. They're not around anyone else. It's already zoned industrial. You know, it's been through the planning commission. I think they made a great choice when they were planning this out. Please help this family grow this business, and I know they will take care of the highest standards to make sure it's successful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any further comment?
Good Good morning, Vice Chair and Supervisors. Lisa Wright from Lewiston. Just to re-emphasize, I think, the importance of denying this appeal. This is an important economic development opportunity for another small business in Trinity County. I think that we need to get above the stigma that is perpetuated by these kind of appeals, that somehow cannabis is bad. If you look at the regulations that are required for a distribution facility, they're very tight. You will not really even know that that is a building that has cannabis in it from the outside. There are security plans that are required, refrigeration, etc. One of the most frequent calls that I get from clients of Flora, is, where can I sell my product? They don't know if we can trust these people in Humboldt. They have to go to Humboldt. They have to go to somewhere else. So to have that here locally will benefit the industry as a whole as well, and bring jobs, just jobs that are desperately needed, well-paying jobs. And that's how we're going to attract more people to this area. There's nothing wrong with cannabis. We have to get past this, this idea. It's legal in the state of California. We have hundreds of small businesses that employ several people generally, and a lot of times they're family farms. It's critical. I don't know any other industry where we have in this area the opportunity to grow from 250, 300, 500 small businesses. You're not going to add gas stations. An industrial park is a perfect location for this expansion opportunity. It sat empty. I was an economic development director for 8 years, and to have an empty industrial park, not a good look. You want to be out marketing that, bringing people in. That is a way to increase your tax base. So I urge you to deny the appeal. We've already spoken to issues of, is there even standing? Comments weren't made in a timely fashion, and on the CEQA document. So there's a variety of problems with this, but at the core, I really believe that we want to see this board support economic development, support small business, support the one industry in this area that is growing and has the opportunity to provide additional tax base. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Brian Muir. I'm a citizen of Weaverville. I'm certainly not a cannabis expert, but I do know something about federal granting agencies. I was a county auditor controller for 22 years, and I can tell you that federal agencies are typically underfunded, and the reason is they go out and collect money when it's available for things like this, where they find that they have an opportunity to collect $3 million. So I would urge you to resolve that issue before you move forward, or if you choose to have it indemnified, that you have proof of the ability to make that payment. That's a lot of money, and I certainly would suggest that it's not appropriate for the taxpayers to share that risk.
Thank you.
Jake Grossman, Chris Hayford, co-owner of Team. I don't even know why this conversation has gone this far, because I thought at the beginning of this we just set standing that if you don't challenge it, you can't appeal it. Currently, the industrial park is actually home to a homeless encampment. For 3 years, there was a CUP for active for nursery that was not challenged. I think it's comical that we have heard after the previous appeal today, we just heard from somebody saying that this was swept through quickly and that nobody had a chance to know about it. I did not know that there was a single person in Trinity County that would have the gall to say that there was anything quick or efficient about the cannabis department in Trinity County. I'm kind of, feel like I'm in a twilight zone because I've been listening for years that this is the appropriate place. I've seen a business there for years approved. I could not find one single thing that Director Hunter said during the entire start of this that I could not have wholeheartedly agreed with, which is quite honestly a cold in hell. So I would urge you guys to deny this. I'm sorry Mr. Ryan is in court today for depositing oil in a waterway. You know, it's all how you look at these things. I hear, you know, Mr. Underwood saying the business park, well, the road is industrial way. When we took over the property, they took the concrete plant out of there. So I'd urge the board to stand up, maybe even ask folks to stop wasting everybody's time with ridiculous appeals. And for us to be able to move forward, you know, we've worked for years on this. It's really scary to think that I could spend money building buildings that we've been approved after years of work and stuff to then be stopped by literally stuff that doesn't even make sense. It seems like the bureaucratic process or the administrative process is being kind of weaponized when all else has failed to stop an agenda. So we're just going to bog your time down with appeals and bog everyone's time down with appeals. I'd love to keep moving forward. My family is the first tax canvas sale in Trinity County, I believe, for their county tax. I'd love to keep doing that. Love to keep working with Trinity County families, raising my family here. And I hope that we can put this to rest and keep moving forward so that there's some jobs and economy for the children and grandchildren of the people that are opposing this. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comment?
We have Paul Hauser on Zoom.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm speaking in favor of the appeal. I know the advocates have, you know, with great repetition said that this is a compatible site, but there's no way that that's true because the current general plan never contemplated cannabis activities at all, certainly not like this, because they weren't legal at the time. So, you know, that idea that that this is a compatible site and in alignment with the general plan obviously won't withstand legal scrutiny, and it's just simply not true. But I'd rather focus on an area that Jim talked about, and that's the opt-out. I think it's critical if we're going to maintain any level of harmony within the community that the integrity of the opt-outs be maintained. And recategorizing nursery cultivation and calling it propagation doesn't change the fact that there's cultivation planned as part of this project in an opt-out. And other folks that are fighting hard to maintain the integrity of their opt-outs look at that and think, you know, what is, is our opt-out going to be attacked in the same way? I think that's a serious issue the board should consider with this appeal. I know with the last appeal that was just up to, folks made a big deal that there was a unanimous approval at the Planning Commission. This certainly didn't have any unanimous approval. As a matter of fact, one planning commissioner was absent, the other one admitted to not understanding the issue at all. Given the new information that's come to light, I can't imagine that you wouldn't send this back to the Planning Commission for some more analysis. This issue with federal grants, I imagine it's not just an issue of whether you have 3.1 million in liability, but do you potentially jeopardize the ability to get future grants if you take an action like this? Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. And do we have any other commenters on Zoom?
Catherine Sidman.
Catherine Sidman, Lewiston, California. I want to thank Supervisor Gogan for coming to the TAA monthly meeting and addressing the invested, responsible small business owners in my community who are constantly barraged with threats for their livelihood by a punitive special interest group that I don't understand why we're kowtowing to. Look at the results for the tax measure. Look at how many constituents in Lewiston.
Excuse me, can you keep your comments about item 5.6, please?
Item 5.6, we need business in this county. We need industry in this county. It's an industrial use in an industrial park. Go anywhere else to the established, I mean, certainly within California, but Oregon, Washington, Colorado, this is an industrial use. It has more safety regulations than anything else that would have been there, certainly more than a concrete plant. That's what the use is for. And, you know, I don't understand the evisceration, the systematic evisceration of small business in Trinity County. Lewiston has empty buildings all over because of the unfriendly business practices of Trinity. And that's not cannabis related. That's just aggressive against business. I understand that there's a lot of wealthy retirees from the Bay Area who came up here and bought houses and think that this place should be a park. But some of us, and I'm speaking as a school board member in Lewiston, I'm speaking as a site council member for the high school, some of us are raising families here. Some of us want to see our kids go get degrees in chemistry, botany, business, accounting, and come back to a robust economy in this county. We can have all of that, but we can't have it if people who are hell-bent on eradicating devil's lettuce are going to be making the moves all over the place. Cannabis is here, cannabis is staying, cannabis will be here. This is an economy, an economic opportunity that there is no parallel for. It's a new industry and we can have nice things, you guys. We can have enough money to take care of other problems that are going on in this county. We can have tax revenue. This could be so good. And the people that have invested in these business licenses are working so hard to be compliant that this continual persecution is just, it's unattractive. I strongly urge the county to stop listening, stop signing, stop caving.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands and no more chats.
I'd like to comment.
Okay, we'll go to Zoom first and then come back to the room.
Am I on?
Yes?
Good morning, Supervisors. John Brower from Junction City. And this is another one of those issues that it is unfortunate. I think everybody's time is being wasted by a group of people that are, I mean, they do seem hell-bent on obstructing this transition from to regulated in our county. You know, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 unlicensed operations in the county. This is merely a means of transitioning some of that business into the well-regulated program that the state and county have developed. I have to imagine there's likely some nursery and distribution and manufacturing operations going on elsewhere in the county that are unlicensed to serve those 4,000 cultivators. And this operation is attempting to serve the licensed and heavily regulated side of the industry that you would think these folks would be encouraging, but instead they seem to only be encouraging the unlicensed side of the industry with their actions. And the staff report is clear and well written in their request to deny this appeal and back your planning commissioner's decisions. Now, if not an industrial park, an SUD zoning, then where would you put these uses? The industrial zoning in Trinity County provides for the most impactful uses, like a concrete batch plant. These uses aren't nearly as impactful as that. And for these folks to continue wasting time and obstructing while bringing no real better ideas or solutions is tiresome and unfortunate. I want to encourage you guys to uphold the Planning Commission's approval of this license and denied the appeal. I think it's an obvious one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sally Barrow, Bear Creek Road. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know this was going on before, and I apologize for not making any comments earlier. I listened to the people that want to do this, and it sounds like they've taken a lot of careful consideration and so on. But I just want to put my voice that I couldn't disagree more with the premise that commercial cannabis is the answer for Trinity County. I feel that this premise is what motivated a rushed urgency ordinance that allowed the Cannabis Division to begin accepting applications and issuing cultivation permits before there was adequate compliance measures in place. I've got the same feeling about this establishment of this cannabis nursery, distribution, and manufacturing center. Maybe it is the best place. The question I just now heard was, if not here, where? So exactly, let's consider that. Is this the best place? And like I said, maybe it is. Where would be a more appropriate place? The industrial park is within the Weaverville opt-out, so Weaverville has already said they don't want any commercial cannabis in Weaverville. It's adjacent to residential neighborhoods. It's home to a college and a beautiful performing arts venue that I believe holds church services on Sunday. The county buildings housed there often offer services to people whose lives have been damaged by their inability to handle the use of recreational drugs. The coming health center will also be treating some people with similar problems. Allowing this cannabis facility at this location would permanently change Weaverville. Are we ready for the unintended consequences of that change? Or are we rushing to chase the elusive goose that lays the golden egg that we hear so much about but see so little evidence of? And I also want to say that it's not a waste of time for you to hear the voices of the citizens, no matter what they're saying. So I'm kind of offended by that comment. We have a right to speak also. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment on this item?
Patrick Cahan?
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Patrick Kahn from Sawyer.
Yes, we can hear you.
I agree with the last person's assessment that all citizens should stand up and talk, and so I feel compelled to say something on this issue. I've been coming to meetings about cannabis since they were happening in the high school library. And so I understand firsthand as a cultivator the reefer madness, as I'll call it, since it's sensational, of some of the citizens in Trinity County. Not here, not now, not ever. There are minds that you can change, and there are minds you can't change. And that's what I've been listening to for a very long time, struggling to maintain myself as a licensed cultivator in the state of California, residing in Trinity County. There's so many nuances to this. When I call the state and try to get guidance, they let me know that the state's the only one who issues cannabis licenses. Everyone else issues permits. So there's a lot of nuances to who has power and what the power is. But the reality is we need to work together to get out of this idea of reefer madness and that it's all bad, or even that it's all good. But it is one thing, and that is it is here to stay. And so I just encourage the board to stop kicking the can down the road and allowing groups to hijack the program and make it hard for any progress to happen on staff. And I also encourage the community to continue to voice their concerns and their feelings against cannabis. But I also implore you to understand that this is the state of California and the United States of America. There are bills in DC as we speak. It's a, to me anyway, it's a foregone conclusion that the days of reefer madness are gone. And I may never change some of your minds, but I'll always try. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris W.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Chris Williams, Weaverville. I grew up in the industrial park area. My parents bought their property in 1989 when it was just a beautiful forest. And a short time later, all of those trees were clear cut for this, quote, industrial park. And for decades, aside from this weird cement rock business, it's remained empty, although it is a great place to walk your dogs. I recently graduated Harvard University, and I was super excited to return to Trinity County and work in the cannabis industry, an industry that is heavily regulated and has so much potential to boost our local economy. In the same area, if we're concerned with what's going on in that, industrial park way, there is a church, and I would argue that religious ideology is way more damaging than a nursery and a distribution center, but that's just me. So I urge the Board of Supervisors to deny this appeal. The Planning Commission made the absolute right decision. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands and no new chats.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Lori Wills from Lewiston. I was not prepared to speak on this issue. I actually listened to the Planning Commission meeting on this issue. However, I did not feel qualified or informed enough to speak up at that hearing. I don't feel qualified or informed enough to speak really on it today. But I just want to share 2 points. Number one, I don't understand the difference, the technical difference between growing premature plants for sale versus cultivating. So as a concerned citizen, to me, they're still growing cannabis. And I'm not anti-cannabis. I'm in favor of cannabis being in the right areas. And personally, I just don't feel that it should be next to our college, our new clinic, and our Performing Arts Center. Secondly, I believe that there was quite a bit of conflict amongst the commissioners during that hearing. And I recall one of the commissioners being very adamantly opposed to this location, and Director Hunter saying, well, if not here, where? And the very next item was for a similar license, I believe out in the Hayfork area. And I recall that specific commissioner's comments on that one that said, oh, on this matter, you're telling me there's nowhere else for this to be suitably placed, but now you're bringing before me another appeal for a similar license type out in Hayfork. So that seems to be maybe a more appropriate place. I'm not going to urge you one way or the other on how to vote on this. I just wanted to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Crystal Bell from Lewiston. I just wanted to make comment in the area of the opt-out with this issue. I believe, as Lori Wills just spoke, we are advocates just to make sure that cannabis is in the appropriate locations. We have nothing against cannabis. We're starting to feel a little, little anxious about always being deemed as being anti-cannabis. That's not the case. But what we have in front of us is a cannabis operation that was approved to go into an opt-out zone. Most of us that are dealing with opt-out areas do believe that it's cannabis operations that everyone in opt-outs are talking about, not just cultivation. It's just in general not to have cannabis operations in our opt-outs. And maybe that's something that needs to really be thought about and discussed in this issue, because as Lori said, growing a nursery plant is, to us, also a cultivation issue. So I just wanted to speak my mind in saying that I think it's an issue of the location due to the opt-out area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
We have Hayes Family Farms. Oh, they have lowered their hand. We'll go to Adrian Keys.
Good afternoon, Adrian Keys from Hayfork. I speak in favor of this project today. I do find it to be in an acceptable location, possibly an ideal location. In consideration of that planning commission meeting, as a resident of Hayfork, I found it to be, I could say ironic that this spot in Weaverville in an industrial zone off of a paved road with real good on access to Highway 299, which is clearly the main corridor through the county, was deemed to be an inappropriate location by one of the planning commissioners, whereas the project at Hayfork, which I also support, is in an ag zone, and it's off of a paved road, but it's on a dirt road, and then it's access to Highway 3, it's considerably further out than the access to 299 at this location, and I just, it was hard to ignore the irony in those kind of mismatched comments. And, as far as the cultivation element, I understand Weaverville's cultivation prohibition in certain zones. Some of the main findings for that, and particularly the unavoidable finding of odor, is something you will not experience with the nursery. Nursery plants are small, they're immature, they do not produce the type of compounds that cause those odors and are likely required to be mitigated by the ordinance itself. So I know that's the only piece that I find questionable around that. It was a Cdfa license in the past, but now we've gone through consolidation and all licenses are issued by the same entities. And I would also agree with the previous speaker that the county issues land use permits, the state issues business operational licenses. So I think that basically at the whole level, but that's another point that really we need to clarify to make sure that our language is accurate. Because they do have different ramifications. But again, please push this project through. I think a distributorship, nursery, and manufacturing in the industrial park in Weaverville is quite a nice location, and I think would serve the community well. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else on Zoom, Emma?
I have no one else on Zoom.
Okay. With that, we will close the public comment period, and I think take a short bathroom recess before we bring this back to the plant.
Chair, can I do some clarification of the ordinances and do a little history, or would you like me to wait?
Let's take a short break first.
I'm getting a kick under the table after.
So we will, let's come back at 11:45. Meeting back to order. Supervisor Groves, you.
Yeah, if I can figure out how to turn my computer back on. So, hang on. So one thing I want to clear up is the discussion on opt-outs and the industrial park and the opt-out. So 2.5 years ago, we've already really had this discussion, and when it came to manufacturing, and this was all public hearings and controversial at the time, and we do have opt-outs for manufacturing. But at that time, the will or the thought of the area was to, in the Weirville area, to make it, confine it to the historic district. And because of the industrial park being the industrial park that it was considered a doable place to be for cannabis manufacturing. But also with that, we kept the same opt-outs for Coffee Creek Trinity Center and the Lewiston Community Center and the Bucktail subdivision. Those were added in because they were felt, and by the individuals in those areas wanted those areas to be non-manufacturing zones. So I just want to be clear that, I mean, we have had these discussions before. We have had tons of public input on this. Not to say the public can't, you know, have different viewpoints at a later time, but I just want to be clear that these were thought out, was part of the planning process. That's all.
Okay, well, we did close the public comment, so at this point, if any of the supervisors have any additional questions to staff, or if anyone would entertain them, or I will entertain a motion if anyone would care to make one.
I'll make a motion. I would move that we refer this back to the Planning Commission for further evaluation, just because there's new information that has been made available that is, I can save that part for discussion. Just leave it in the motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Thank you. My concern is that with this new information, I'm working really hard right now with the Spirit California Economic Development, because that committee swap didn't happen until a month ago. That information is new to me. It is really important that we stay in good standing with those funding sources. So it's not, in my mind, just a matter of whether or not we can pay the bill and who would pay the bill, but what does that do to our opportunities in the future when we're reaching out to them for further applications, requesting those grants, and they look at it and say, well, you didn't abide by our governing guidelines the first time, why would we extend our resources to you? And as was mentioned in public comment, I'm sorry, Mr. Muir's, he made a point to say, oh, I know what it was. He made a point to say that those folks are not necessarily heavily funded, and so when they can go back and look for, you know, to collect on somebody that hasn't followed through properly with what those guidelines were, they will take that opportunity to do so. Well, that tells me that those dollars are going to be maybe more restricted. I just don't want to close the door on some opportunity because we're a little bit too quick here. I have also a concern that, you know, we saw in our last appeal that there are times when, yes, we have a process and we need that process. We would like that process to be as predictable as possible. But there are some things that are not always predictable, some things that are unique. And to rush something forward just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that it's fully thoughtful. And so to take that little bit of extra time, and maybe it's right, maybe it goes forward and it's right. But if it's right, it's worthy of making sure that it's right for everyone. I just feel like, you know, this is kind of a system of checks and balances. And maybe the appeal isn't so much that we're appealing the issue. Maybe what we're appealing, or what I'm hearing in the comments, is really the planning commission's, I was going to say decision, but really their process that's being appealed to. So I just think it's worthy of asking a couple of more questions. We've seen what happens when we don't ask enough questions soon enough.
I have a question. Since Margaret, when I asked the question at the beginning of this, you had said that there had to be some sort of standing and voice previous for the appeal to take process, and that it seems there wasn't. Why did this even come here?
That question actually has just been asked, and we'll have to look at our internal processes. Typically, we bring them all to you unless they're statutorily out of bounds. But when there is some kind of, I don't want to call it fuzzy language, but it's not a specific CEQA appeal. There's other stuff that is mentioned that could go outside the scope of CEQA, which does have the requirement of voicing your concern at the planning level, that it was brought to you to make that determination.
So would the new information that came today qualify as a reason to appeal since it is new information?
So I don't know what specifically we're requiring as a new information. I think we're looking at
the fact that we may have be breaking our contract with the original industrial park by allowing this.
So that would have no effect on the CEQA aspect to it, so no, that would not be appropriate for CEQA. As to the CUP, again, I'm not sure that would be grounds to deny it even at the planning level. But that would be the one that could potentially get remanded. As to CEQA, that would not qualify as a CEQA appeal.
Okay. So any actions on the CEQA side of this issue?
Those are fine. Those cannot be remanded, and there was no comment on them made at the planning commission hearing that would reopen it.
Okay.
So, Margaret, I have a question for you. I think we already asked it, but there will be no repercussions between EDA, the board, or the citizens if the feds come after this project?
So I can't say affirmatively yes to that, but what I can say is that part of our process, we do have an indemnification, which means that an individual is required to compensate the county for any losses we take in granting the license. Of course, if the agency or the individual or company that we are indemnifying doesn't have the resources or insurance to cover that indemnification, there always is potential that it can come back on the county.
So if we write this in that they have to have the coverage to indemnify this, does that cover us?
It should cover us, correct.
While we're discussing this section of it, I might be alone here, but to me, this EDA paperwork, and I just looked through it quickly because we've been here, but the unauthorized use of property is what you would lose your funding for. By allowing a cannabis use in a special unit development or specific unit build, the SUD is what the use of the property is. So unless we turn it into an apartment complex, we're not giving up the SUD. So then I don't see the feds coming after our funding because we haven't actually changed the project. So the part of the CUP was to determine whether or not that this use fit into the SUD. So that would be that point, is when this should have been brought up, number one, and then the SUD, I don't see us changing the SUD use of that land by allowing a use that fits. It's an industrial use in an industrial park. So I really don't, I see this as a non-issue, the risk of losing funding, personally.
I disagree.
Okay.
From the standpoint that, first of all, that SUD use that was created infinitum way back when ago, cannabis wasn't even a consideration. So when you look at the uses, in fact, it's interesting to read down through them. Even the type tells you how old they are. They're done on a typewriter. There are uses on there that we don't even have today. One of them is a printing company. We still have a little printer in town that begs to stay alive because everybody orders online. So to say that that was fully considered, I don't think so. And the other problem with it is that this specific portion of the funding, the EDA, there were 2 grant funds that let that business part go through. The EDA was a federal funding source that provided only for the infrastructure, is my understanding. And that is the exact reason that Jeremy and I had to do a committee swap, is because they won't fund cannabis anything because it's federally still illegal. So I'm not, I mean, I don't know, but I don't think we're done asking.
The funding isn't going to the cannabis use, the funding went to the SUD. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, I don't feel that we have an axe hanging over our head for this one. I think that it's not as terrible as it sounds.
I think it's risk management from the standpoint that we may feel a certain way, but we don't have those facts yet.
So Jill, how do you, in my Cracker Jack lawyer box diploma, I would tend to agree with Dan, but how do you submit that we move forward and get a definitive decision on this? I'm not too apt to send EDA a letter and watch it sit there for 2 years while nobody does anything. So what's the proposal to see what the risk is?
I would figure out who to call and ask. I suppose it's who.
Well, who do we get a definitive, at what point would you be comfortable that this is not a risk?
At the point that I'm sure that we're not going to end up owing $3.1 million. So, moving forward on the hope that it's going to be okay does not seem wise to me.
Well, I just caution that that when it comes to cannabis, the federal government usually throws it in the wastebasket and won't make a decision. I know their decision on federal water in Washington or federal power, I mean, that took 2 or 3 years for them to make a commitment to allow the federal power to be used. Margaret?
So I think what we probably need to do, I mean, Margaret maybe have some insight into this, but probably reaching out to Bob Nash, who is the person who runs the Superior California Economic Development Office and puts these grants through. I mean, what harm can it be to ask more questions?
Well, the question from the grant writer is not, Sue, I think what Dan is making a very good case that it's more of a legal question that we have followed through. What the use is isn't as important as that it's still a use for the SUD and that we haven't changed the SUD. Margaret, do you have any input on how we would?
yes, I think what we would do is review the terms of the grantee, make a determination about what restrictions apply to it, and then we can reach out for a formal opinion, which you are correct, will take years to do it. What I think is interesting is that if the title of the property doesn't have these restrictions on them, I think that could ultimately result in litigation between the property owner and anyone related to this if we were to somehow start denying use of the property based on some document that was put into effect in 1991 that potentially has some terms or conditions that would prohibit their use. But again, we can do that while they're moving forward on the project, and ultimately if it finds that there's incompatible use, we can deal with it at that time as well.
So
I'm sorry, I follow you mostly, but could you just repeat the beginning where I'm confused on the part? Is there a way you could just restate the beginning of what you said, where someone is going to?
So in order to determine if this is an incompatible use under this grant, we'd have to review the terms and conditions of the grant to make that determination. We could ultimately obtain a formal opinion from the EDA. However, again, I think that would take an extraordinary amount of time, and I doubt, as Supervisor Rose stated, that they would come down with a formal opinion on it, because the experience that we are seeing is that they are by and large allowing state cannabis to move forward without any restrictions on it. So that wouldn't be a grounds for them to withdraw any funding. But that would be a step we could take. My concern, again, is that we stop this project based on unknowns for years to come. We could have a bigger problem there, would be my concern from a liability standpoint.
That's the part I was wondering about. And you expanded on it just a little bit more. The liability would be?
If we're stopping a project over something we have no evidence of, and again, it's not on their title, that there is this restriction on the use of this property or is unauthorized use on this property, we don't have appropriate findings that we could make to support that. They would have grounds to pursue litigation against the county and ultimately would likely be successful on that. Again, because we're stopping the project based on something that's not a proper land use finding.
Is there a way to take a pause, not stop the project, but to answer that question first? But you're saying it's going to take 2 years to answer the question.
Well, to get a formal opinion, I think if we looked at the terms and conditions, we might get an answer. But yes, to get a formal opinion, it would likely take a good substantial period of time if they ever gave us a formal opinion on it.
So Margaret, I know it's very unfair of us to ask you these legal opinions on the fly here. Would continuing this to the July 30th special meeting and adding that on give you adequate time to give a opinion from a risk management side that you would feel comfortable standing behind, or you don't need any time to state what you think is?
Well, I haven't reviewed the grant terms, so yes, that would give me an opportunity to review the grant terms and look to see what specifically we would violate. I think it would also give us an opportunity to confirm that our indemnity provisions were appropriate and that the business has the funding to support an indemnity clause, because I believe that's what Supervisor Gogan is asking for. So yes, that would. Again, I would not recommend continuing anything related to CEQA because, as I said, that is closed. I don't believe you have the authority to make anything. As to the CUP, we can continue that and provide additional information.
Fair enough. I have a couple questions. Sorry, Dan.
Go ahead.
First of all, I think the board welcomes all the public comment that we get. I think it's very informational for us, and we do take it to heart. I don't know who's speaking for this project.
Tom, our co-owner.
All right, so it says somewhere here, video monitoring 24 hours on-site security / 24 hours on-site security. The video monitoring, I understand the on-site security consists of a person.
Oh, human beings, yeah. So state law requires both of those things for distribution. You have to have video monitoring of all the location access, plus all the storage locations, and you have to save that for 90 days. You also have to have a physical person 24/7, 365 on the location wherever there is cannabis stored for distribution.
Armed or unarmed?
The law doesn't require armed. We've been talking with the sheriff to hire post certificate having people, so if armed become necessary, at the very least we'll have an interface with the sheriff. So you can't have an armed person on the premises. The advantage of this location is that the premises is ringed within a fence, and then there are other buildings outside, so it's theoretically possible. We could have an armed guard that was not within the premises but was without. However, if we were doing that, it's going to be somebody with a post certificate.
So in a guard shack, something like that.
Yeah.
And this guard is state mandated. This is not deciding we want to have an armed guy.
I didn't know if armed meant taser to begin with, you know, up to, you know, firearm. So I'm sure you guys will talk to Saxon. I think it's probably mandatory. The second question I have is how many employees? And the rate of pay, actually. If you could just average.
Well, part of the employees was tied into this concept of a processor license, which the county doesn't have. That's about half our employees, because ideally we'd like to bring the service of trimming from all these employees far-flung going out to the individual farms, bring that here to this location. We're talking about 25 employees probably that would be specific to that task. Without that task, which we don't have right now, we're talking about 20 employees at maximum. That's when the nursery's at full operation and we've got the full manufacturing and distribution happening. Otherwise, we have a low of maybe 15 employees.
And what was the trimming holdback or setback when?
There's no ordinance.
Which came before the planning commission 30 minutes before our hearing, was that it was realized that actually wasn't in the ordinance. It had been prepared by staff for a couple of years. So we opted to pull that out and move forward.
And they would be paid at least minimum wage or per pound, I guess?
Yeah, as far as anything Cdfa, there's a collective bargaining requirement once you get over 20 employees. So, you know, we're with the union, but obviously minimum wage, but we'd like to offer more than that.
You also said per pound, so I would assume you're talking about processing. And I can tell you the only way you can hire processors is if you are paying competitive wages. Folks are making anywhere from $100 to $500 a day training in Trinity County.
Okay, well, one more question. Okay, tax dollars brought into the county. Estimation?
We're the only tax industry in the county.
Well, I'm not asking.
So a lot more than the other industries.
That's not the question, though. I could go outside and find a penny and get more than that.
It's hard to put an estimation on.
It's a controversial question. I myself am in favor of taxing distribution in Trinity County. Many other cultivators are not in favor of that. They think it impacts their ability to have a marketable product. I'm in the distribution for hoping to be in the distribution business, so I think that we should have a tax on distribution. However, we do not have one now. So whether this is going to create cannabis-specific tax revenue, that's something we would need to approve, but it will create payroll tax.
The other piece to look at is the level of sales. Having a home team pushing Trinity County product, you're going to see a lot more sales than maybe having gone on to Sonoma, and hope that someone at Sonoma is pushing for your Trinity County family farm as hard as your neighbor.
And until such a time as we get a tax, we have mentioned we would be interested in using county seal or something on products produced entirely in Trinity County. So there's some funds that we would be willing to pay for that licensing.
Well, we do have a motion and a second on the table, and do we have any, does anybody want to make a competing motion or further discussion?
May I make a comment very quickly regarding the motion? Please.
Yes.
There was part of that motion included sending it back to the Planning Commission. As the planning director, I do urge that that be omitted. This is not a land use issue. And that falls under the land use issues fall under the purview of the Planning Commission, not the information that came before us today. If that motion is going to be considered.
So could we read back what the motion is?
That would pretty much do it with the motion.
Yes, all that I have, the motion is referring this back to the Planning Commission.
I'll make a subsequent motion that we refer this to Margaret and then table this until the July 30th special meeting to look for Margaret's analysis and approval or disapproval at that time.
Please don't stop us out.
Okay, we have a motion. Would anyone care to second that motion?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So if both of these fails, what happens, Margaret?
The appeal would be denied.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Right.
Motion by Supervisor Groves to refer this item to County Council and table this item to July 30th, the special board meeting. Second by Supervisor Cox. Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Fraser?
No. Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to Treasurer Tax Collector. Item 5.7, adopt a resolution ordering the discharge of accountability for delinquent taxes on unsecured property. Discharge of accountability in the amount of $187,601.28 of non-collectible delinquent unsecured taxes.
Good afternoon, Terry McCoy, Treasurer Tax Collector. The item that you have before you is requesting to authorize a resolution to discharge of accountability. So what this is for, we have revenue and taxation that basically dictate to us how, when, and the methods that we use as far as how we would go about collecting. The items that we've included within this are those that have been exceeded all of those efforts to what we're allowed to do. Our new system that we have for property taxes allows us to do this yearly, and so before it was quite cumbersome in order for us to bring forth this item to discharge these. This will save us a lot of time. Actually, I think all three of our offices, as far as myself, the assessor, and the auditor, in regards to basically making these inactive is what this would do. It does not absolve them of this debt. It doesn't. It just puts it basically in a discharged or an inactive status in our system. So basically, any item that we have on unsecured that remains unpaid, we filed liens on these folks. So oftentimes, what happens is when someone goes to renew their license for DMV for their boats or purchase a home or what have you, those instances, then we'll have folks come in that will then at that point decide that that's when they'll go ahead and take care of this to resolve it. So just wanted to make you aware of that. If you have any questions for me on this?
Any questions?
I'm just a point of curiosity, if they do resolve it later and have like interest and penalties accrued over that time.
Oh yeah, that doesn't stop.
And some of these are really large amounts. it's kind of sad, but you can't do anything about it. Then your hands are tied is the way I read this.
And we have a very limited time frame when we can perform what I would consider to be aggressive collections. It's not a popular, but it is part of my job, but it's something that we can do, but we have not utilized in the past as far as going out and doing physical seizures of things. Like we've had logging companies and things like that that haven't, we don't have the resources necessarily to go out and repo a cat and come out. You know, there's a lot of steps that need to take place in order for us to move forward. So these items here basically kind of bogs down the system for the collections that we do perform, and we can move, you know, with the aggressive collections because we don't have the option to pull those that are non-collectible.
Any other questions?
It's kind of sad I know half the people on the list.
Never a good sign.
Most of them deceased, unfortunately. No questions from me.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
Darrell Forland is a retired assessor. It does in fact work. They file that lien, and because people aren't paying attention to this stuff, really is what it amounts to. But they go to do a credit report, maybe in another state or whatever, and you get the phone call about what they're going to do with their delinquent taxes. So it is in fact a good tool to take care of this stuff. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
We'll bring it back to the board.
Okay, I would move to adopt item 5.7 as presented.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second, Emma.
Motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Fraser?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Everybody walked out of this.
You want to go and read the closed session into the record?
All right. We'll be going into closed session. Items, I can read them both at one time, correct?
I believe so.
Item 6.1, Government Code Section 5495.4.5C, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, number of cases 1, Trinity Action Association, Inc. versus Trinity County et al., Trinity County Superior Court case number 19 CB001, and item 6.2, Government Code Section 54954.5E, Public Employee Evaluation, County Administrative Officer.
We have public comment from Adrian Keys. Can you please clarify? Can you please clarify which item specifically you are speaking on? Thank you.
I certainly will. It's Adrian Keys from Hayfork. I'd like to comment on the TAA lawsuit. And and the shade behind, I was expecting some conversation first, so I'm just getting my notes straight. Where I'd like to start is with the definition of, or the explanation from state code concerning provisional licenses. And this is new from the trailer bill that just was signed. It's code section 26050.2. It states until June 30th, 2022, Department may at its sole discretion issue a provisional license to an applicant if the applicant has submitted a complete license application to the department, including the following, if applicable. If compliance with California Environmental Quality Act is not complete, evidence that compliance is underway. That's us. That's where we are right now. That's where we've been this whole time. We have the right to access provisional licenses through that piece of code section right there. A little bit further down, and this is some new stuff, they're putting some performance standards in here. To illustrate progress with compliance with California Environmental Quality Act, a determination from the department that one of the following documents has been met. If a local jurisdiction is the lead agency has made substantial progress during the past 12-month licensure term toward completing discretionary project site-specific review by drafting, preparing, or circulating for public review an environmental document pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. Well, that's us too. We've fulfilled our obligations for the state to prove that we are making progress on CEQA compliance as a county. We've gone from having a CEQA exempt ordinance to having an ordinance that has a full environmental document behind it, and also has adopted the mitigations from that document into our ordinance. So the other piece of code section, right below the first one, is if compliance with local ordinance is not complete, proof compliance is underway. Well, that's our transition plan. All we need to do to move forward for the next 12 months is to create the transition plan. We will be compliant with the state regulations. Our farms can continue to operate, tax revenue will continue to come in, and enforcement will still continue to be funded by the cannabis department. It's interesting to note that 39 out of 39 of the state testing laboratories are provisional, so the entire supply chain as we know it and every drop of funding that the county can access through the grants and such, is dependent on the provisional system, which is floating the entirety of the state program. It's not just us. We've had our own trouble in the county. It's been a challenge. But every single municipality in the state is in the same boat, and that's why this trailer bill language was passed, because without it, the entire program would grind to a halt, and that would be the end of that for now. I'm running out of time, so I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have one more, Rhoda Kane.
Oh, good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
This is Rhoda Kane. I'm from the Trinity Center area, and I will also be commenting about the CA lawsuit. Just quickly, this morning I just quickly went through some of the old Trinity Journal articles relating to this case, and I know that most of the supervisors were not here at the time that the original settlement was signed. But just a little bit, so on March 5th, 2019, the Trinity Journal quoted Judge Wood that for this case, the county is correctly operating under the provisions of SB 94. The state gave everybody to Margaret Long as commenting that TAA claims are without merit. Trinity Journal on October 2nd, 2019, quoted Keith Rose, they're saying, sometimes in life, holding the nose and doing what you know is wrong is still the best thing to do. They said that he indicated unwillingness to risk potentially $500,000 over the next 2 years fighting a lawsuit with the chances of losing. I do think it's important at this time to remember that it's likely to end up costing significantly more and more for us to keep on with this TAA lawsuit, that the county will be losing significant amounts of money from the cannabis program to avoid paying a little bit, to avoid the potential of losing a case that the opposition is without merit. I would like the supervisors to at least consider a counteroffer to the settlement. We've invested everything based on the Board of Supervisors giving us the go-ahead years ago to get these permits. We've paid and paid and paid. We've jumped through every hoop. We've worked so hard, and we simply cannot afford to complete the CEQA process if we cannot make any money this season. It can't be done. I think it's important that the county make a counteroffer saying that if we are underway, then we should be considered compliant. I urge them to oppose it as written, and I just don't know, like, well, of course, I don't believe the county should ever have signed it in the first place. That's water under the bridge. The best we can do now is try to move forward and try not to let the group done our county forever. Thanks.
Thank you.
We have Carla Avila.
Hello, this is Carla Avila. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Carla Avila from High Palm and Executive Director of Trinity County Agricultural Alliance. I just want to reiterate some really important points on the TAA lawsuit settlement issue. Just to clarify again, the state issues the licenses. The local jurisdiction issues permits. Permission. You can indeed grant authorization to the state and to the business while compliance with CEQA and or with local ordinances is underway. And that language, Business and Professions Code 26050.2, is being extended in Trailer Bill ABSB 160, extending the provisional licensing program. And so it's really important that we align with sign away our local authorization to complete this environmental compliance process. So much of the heavy lifting is done. We have a programmatic EIR. We have 230 permits ready to go through review. We have to date 80 full annuals at the state. Typically per CEQA law, and I realize we're in an alternate reality here, but a project only goes through its CEQA determination once in its lifetime. Now we have enshrined in our ordinance mitigation measures to ensure the utmost standards of environmental compliance, and in Nevada County, they are successfully implementing a plants in the ground program and bringing provisionals through full checklist reviews to full annuals at the state within appropriate timeframes. At the county level, it's costing them $2,200 in fees per permittee, including the necessary environmental CEQA expertise on staff, site inspections 2 times annually. Why would we sign away our rights to implement our program when we are here? We are ready, we have been doing it. And really what we need is to complete the process. I believe we're getting $3.5 million from the state this year for the specific purpose of carrying out local jurisdictional site-specific CEQA review. The state has said they do not want to act as lead agency. They need us to do it here. We are doing it. We have to stop obstructing and let our staff do their jobs. We need strong leadership from the top. We need to direct our county council to defend our county and our programs and our laws. We need to have serious timelines for our staff. There are benchmarks built into the trailer bill for the provisional extension. We can adhere to those benchmarks if we get to work now and stop dwelling on the past. We need these businesses to be able to continue to operate while they complete environmental compliance. These people deserve this, and we need your leadership in order to move this forward in the best way possible. I urge you to seek the best solutions forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine Sidwin.
Catherine Sidman, Lewiston, California. I definitely support TCA's recommendation and strongly urge the county not to sign this settlement. The code is so clear. If compliance with local ordinance is not complete, proof that compliance is underway is adequate. That's what people are doing. The county has a right to support these businesses during the process while the county does the heavy lifting. My gosh, the amazing job that our understaffed agencies are doing trying to facilitate this program. Don't sign away your right to be autonomous. Don't sign away our right to have this industry. We've got $850,000 in licensing fees coming in that's partially going to law enforcement, which is important. We've got an estimated $4 million in tax revenue that could come to us. And the fact that we're still talking about this lawsuit with an agendized hate group is so frustrating, because I'm watching people work so hard, investing in Trinity County and investing in their property, following the most stringent guidelines of any business. I mean, 3 minutes ago, we were all laughing because logging companies aren't paying their taxes and nobody has a means of going after them. Here are people that are putting their own tax measures on the books and fighting for votes to pass them, and then trying to give you checks. They're trying to be good actors in the community. Stop the settlement, stop kowtowing to this agendized group that is not going to be part of a positive future for Trinity County. A positive future for Trinity County is economic stability, even in the face of changing forestry and climate, economic stability so that our kids can go to college and come back and get living wage jobs in technical fields, businesses that are committed to environmental compliance and cleanliness in all of their business practices. Those are the people. It's the bad actors in the hills that are doing illegal grows. None of this affects them. The only people this hurts are the people that are trying at great sacrifice to themselves and their families, people that are trying to do it right. These are my neighbors. These are my friends. This is the economic future of Trinity County, and I can't strongly enough recommend for you to end this now. Don't put it off another day. If you need to come back with a counteroffer, do it, but just don't sign this agreement with these people. Thank you.
Thank you.
John's iPhone.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. John Brower, Junction City. And I would like to echo the comments of the previous speakers, but also mention another issue here. And I know during this discussion, it's easy to look for additional alternatives in addition to going to court and an injunction. Frequently, I hear people saying, well, we could just take our ordinance and go with the state. But I would caution against that for several reasons. One is we do have the existing personal grow ordinance that seems to prohibit anything like that. So that would have to be looked at before going with the state at least auction. But more importantly than that is the fact that although the state does have the authority to act as lead agency regarding CEQA for cannabis licensing, the state lacks both the capacity and the will to do so. And here we are several years into the state program, and the state has yet to act as lead agency on even one of these matters, of these licenses. The new Department of Cannabis Control that just got created with the governor's signature of the Trinity bill also offers the authority for the state to act as lead agency regarding CEQA on these licenses. Yet the DCC's organizational chart has 0 job allocations to perform those chores. Instead, the state chose to go with 144 enforcement positions in their new department that would all be gun-carrying, badge-carrying peace officers. So those in the community that are worried about lack of enforcement on licensees, I think can rest easy. The state has been doing enforcement of their very robust regulations, and it seems like they're heading even stronger that direction. So once again, I want to encourage the board to do not sign another settlement agreement, which is the reason we're here anyway, that the first one got signed, and stand up to this fringe group of extremists that continue to just obstruct this movement forward for our community and our Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I have no other public comment.
All right, with that, we will adjourn and go into closed session.